In a city ruled by gods and chaos, a child born of angels will rise to carry justice into the dark.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Bell Was the Son of Angels of Justice movie. Before we start, please go support Tenma-sama for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken characters' gender, but of course Bell is a male. To make others happy is to suffer for them, to be the salvation of others can be your downfall, to be a hero is your condemnation. Why every hero waits patiently for the day he will die to save another with a smile on his face, why every hero is willing to give everything of himself for everyone else. But not every hero can achieve that. Not every hero can give his all to others. Not every hero dies with a smile on his face. Prologue: A beloved angel. 10 years ago. Hera Family headquarters. The Hera Family. One of the strongest families in Arario, it was a family of pure women, mostly proud and powerful women who did not go below level 4, its strongest members, its captain and vice-captain, both reaching a power much greater than all the other members. All of them proud and unattainable women who had taken that attitude as a distinguishing requirement of their family, of their goddess, the tyrant goddess, Hera. But among those beautiful monsters full of pride, there was also a beautiful angel full of kindness and sweetness, who was able to appease the anger of a tyrannical and proud goddess like Hera, an angel capable of bringing tranquility to anyone and finding beauty even in the most horrible. She was like a beautiful white lily in the middle of a field of roses with thorns. Hera. Mertella. A beautiful young voice was heard from the distance. Through the halls of that beautiful white palace resounded the hurried footsteps of a woman whom the world knew as the incarnation of talent, silence itself. The woman with long, wavy silver hair stopped in her tracks and walked carefully but impatiently into a beautiful field of flowers with a face full of worry. Her heterochromatic, gray and green eyes searched the surroundings with anguish until her eyes shone with joy and her mouth snorted with relief when she saw in the middle of the field of flowers a long wavy white hair being moved by a gentle breeze, revealing a beautiful 15-year-old girl sitting on the grass with extreme tranquility. She was identical to her, they would be like two peas in a pod if it weren't for her snow-white hair and sky-blue eyes that differentiated her from her. No, even with that they could confuse them. What really differentiated her was that beautiful smile on her face that reflected absolute peace, as if nothing in the world was capable of erasing that smile from her face. She looked completely calm and at peace, surrounded by that field of flowers in which she felt free and calm. It was her Eden. That woman was Mertella. Mertella turned around with a calm smile on her face and watched her twin sister walk towards her with a face that reflected complete annoyance and concern. Mertella. How are you, Alfia? Smiling. Alfia was her name, the name of the one everyone knew as Silence, the embodiment of talent, one of the strongest members of the Hera family, a cold and indifferent woman who looked down on everyone, who ignored everything that didn't deserve her attention, everything except her sister. The only being who could change his expression, the only being who deserved his full and complete attention, his reason to live and keep growing strong, his angel, his weak angel. Before Alfia could answer her sister, Mertella had an unexpected coughing fit that made her duck her head and clutch her chest in pain. Alfia's eyes were horrified and she ran to her sister without caring about stepping on those flowers that Mertella liked so much. She stood by her side hysterically, without knowing what to do in this situation. She could only take her to her room, give her medicine and wait for her to get better. The doctors could not do anything else, they could not cure her of her illness. His concern only increased when he saw his sister cough blood in pain, and without thinking any more, he took her in his arms and ran as fast as he could to his room. He had run so fast that he had reached an incredible speed that he had never reached before training, but that did not matter to him now. Alfia entered her room and ran to a huge bed with white quilted sheets that made the bed look like a fluffy cloud. With a gentleness she would not offer to anyone else, Alfia gently placed her sister on the bed and desperately searched through drawers and furniture until she found a small bottle of red pills that she took. He took out one of the pills and gave it to his sister, impatient for her to take it. Every second was vital for her, every second her condition worsened and she could notice it. A minute passed since Mertella took the pill, a minute that for Alfia was hours of worry and anguish, watching her sister suffer for something she didn't deserve, for a curse with which the world brought them both into the world, but that affected her sister more than her. Finally Mertella's coughing stopped and Alfia was able to sigh with relief and let out all that stress and worry she had been keeping in since she didn't find her sister in bed that morning. Alfia. What were you thinking? Worried, you can't just disappear out of the blue in the morning without taking your meds. This is the only thing keeping you alive. Can't you worry a little more about yourself? Breathing heavily. Mertella looked back at her window longingly and smiled softly at her sister before answering. Mertella. I just wanted to see the sky. It looks really beautiful today, don't you think? Calm. Alfia. For you the sky looks beautiful every day, sighing, bowing her head. Mertella. Don't worry so much, nothing is going to happen to me, looking at her gently. Alfia. How can you say that after what just happened? If I hadn't found you in time, then you sick. Mertella watched her for a few seconds before turning to look at the clear sky from her window. Mertella. Forgive me for worrying you too much, I really wanted to go out and see the sky, smiling softly. Alfia clenched her fists, wrinkling her black dress, and gathered the courage to look up and see her sister. She prepared herself, but she really couldn't bear to see her sister like that, looking longingly at the sky, hiding a deep sadness beneath a beautiful smile. She knew it more than anyone, she was her twin sister, how could she not know it, know how much Mertella longed to have been born free of her curse, to be able to enjoy the sun like a normal person, and live without chains like someone free. Alfia looked at her state with anguish, seeing how her body slowly died, how her face slowly became emaciated, and how that disease slowly consumed her, and with all that, she kept a beautiful smile on her face, even if she felt sad inside, she showed that smile to everyone to calm their concern for her. Showing everyone that beautiful smile without worry, without fear and without resentment, a smile that expressed what he felt, peace and tranquility, but that hid his deepest desires. Mertella. It will be in 10 months. Alfia looked up and looked at her, knowing what she meant. The last of the 3 great missions. The Black Dragon. It had been 2 months since they had finished off the Leviathan, after the Poseidon family failed in their task of keeping it under control, and 6 months since the Zeus family finished off the Behemoth. Now both families were preparing to leave in 10 months to complete the last of the 3 great missions. Which could also mean that he would go into a horrendous battle, in which surely more than half of both families would die, or in the worst case all of them. Mertella didn't want her to go, but she couldn't stop her. She was determined to go against that beast, to protect the little peaceful life her sister had left. Alfia sighed and looked up at the window too, it was true, the sky looked beautiful today, not many days you will be able to enjoy such a peaceful view as this one. Mertella. Hey. Alfia. What's going on? Curious. Mertella. If I had a son, what do you think his name would be? Looking at her. Alfia. Ah. What the hell are you saying? Excited. Mertella. I just want to know what name to give a baby if I have one, you don't have to get so excited, laughing. Alfia. I hope so, I swear, if that damn red-eyed pervert touched you I'll. Mertella laughed softly, interrupting her sister's prayer, who calmed down considerably. Mertella. Don't worry, he doesn't have enough guts to do that, smiling calmly. Alfia. He's just a perverted coward, annoyed. Mertella just smiled amusedly and discreetly rubbed her belly, keeping her gaze on the sky. Mertella. You've never been able to capture that coward, mockingly. Alfia snorted in annoyance and looked at her annoyed. Alfia. All she knows how to do is escape, which is what you would expect from a coward who reached level 4 by killing dying monsters and obtained the escape skill by crossing her arms. Mertella. Yes, laughing, I wonder if one of our children could use that ability to help others, smiling. Alfia. Oh. You're talking nonsense again. Excited, besides, I couldn't expect anything from that coward. You should forget about him. He stopped showing up here 2 months ago. Crossing her arms. Mertella. It's true, hiding her face, who knows why it will be, smiling. Mertella laughed silently at her sister who just frowned and cursed the pervert for having taken pity on her to give her attention, according to Alfia. Mertella. Remember the time you used your magic to take down the Leviathan? Looking at her. Alfia. How could I forget I used my magic to quickly finish off that thing so you wouldn't be in danger? How did you come up with the idea of going with us without telling anyone? You could have put yourself in danger, frowning. Mertella. You should stop with the sermons, sister. They make you age faster. Shaking her head. Alfia. Oh. Frowning. Mertella just sighed, shook her head, and continued talking. Mertella. That time when you finished casting your magic and used it against that monster, I could hear a beautiful bell ringing loudly. Alfia. A bell rang. Confused. Mertella. Yes, a strong and determined one. I remember seeing how everyone else relaxed and sighed in relief, as if it were a sign of salvation, smiling. That's how I would like my son to be, strong and determined, for people to calm down just by being next to him, for his presence to mean salvation, like the ringing of your magic, looking at her. Alfia. You're still on about having a child, sighing, you're not going to give up on the idea, are you? Looking at her. Mertella remained silent and smiled innocently as if the answer was obvious, and it was. Alfia. Okay, tired, but let's not touch this topic again, smiling tiredly. Mertella. Yee, smiling happily. Alfia. What's on your mind? Looking at her. Mertella. Bell, I wish her name was Bell, smiling. Alfia. Bell, huh? Bell, I wouldn't like you to name your son after me, I'm no one to remember, smiling dryly. Mertella. You are my beloved sister, that is reason enough, smiling. Alfia shook her head and smiled softly looking at her sister. Alfia. Okay, that's a nice name, looking at her. Mertella raised her arms in celebration under the gaze of Alfia who narrowed her eyes and looked down, regaining her sadness. Mertella. Huh? What's going on? Confused. Mertella looked down at her arms without understanding why her sister had returned to the same state as before. It was after lifting the sleeves of her white dress that she understood. Mertella, oh. Mertella silently looked at her left arm, a slightly reddish purple hue and with swollen veins, a mark that grew larger with each passing day and that sooner or later would spread to her entire body. Mertella smiled sadly seeing this, her illness was progressing at a dangerous pace and the medicines were having less and less effect, she was beginning to lose the ability to move her arm, she was barely able to feel anything in the purple part, at this rate soon she wouldn't even be able to sit in her wheelchair on her own. Mertella was silent for a few seconds before turning to look at the window and opening her eyes slightly in surprise. Alfia was confused when she heard her sister's melodious laugh, a fun and happy laugh, which always calmed her and could take her away from her worries even for a moment. But she had the intrigue that he had her so happy. She was going to ask her, but before she could do so Mertella's voice called her and she immediately gave her full attention. Alfia. What's wrong? Looking at her. Mertella. Well, you see my wheelchair is left in the flower garden. Could you please go get it? Clasping her hands. Alfia. Huh? Surprised. Alfia sighed tiredly and nodded, getting up from the chair she had been sitting in and heading towards the door. Alfia. Very well, but you better not do something like this again, leaving. The door closed under the gaze of Mertella who removed the sheets that Alfia had covered her with and sat on the edge of her bed that was next to the window, removing the lock and opening the windows wide open. He didn't have to wait long to see what was happening because a few seconds later an arm stuck out through the open window and pulled a body with effort that another arm lifted and from there appeared a black hair with a completely red and tired face. He left. Mertella laughed amusedly and watched a black-haired, red-eyed man of her same age look worriedly around the room. Mertella. Calm down, she's gone, looking at him, I told you it was very dangerous to come, they could find out at any moment and if they do they'll do everything possible to hunt you down, doesn't that scare you? Looking at him with a smile. Almost as if he had said the right words, the black-haired man felt a shiver run down his spine that made Mertella laugh. Why yes, it's just that. Again the black-haired man's face turned red, although this time it wasn't because he was hanging from a window frame for 30 minutes, but because of the shame he felt revealing his feelings to the beautiful woman in front of him. It's just that I wanted to see you, I really wanted to see you, blushing. Mertella opened her mouth in surprise, not expecting those words to come out of his mouth with such confidence and without stuttering. She didn't expect that, and her face, white as porcelain, took on a soft reddish tone that showed that his words had had an effect on her. That was unfair. He attacked her by surprise. That was supposed to be his role. Mertella closed her eyes and hid her embarrassment by lying down on her bed and patting her empty side gently. The black-haired man blushed with embarrassment but obeyed the order and went to lie down next to the beautiful lady who was waiting for him with a warm hug and a beautiful smile on her face. Mertella. I was really looking forward to seeing you too, whispering. The black-haired man hugged her back and hid his face in the woman's shoulder, who gently rubbed his head, enjoying the embrace of her beloved. I wanted to see you since before, but I couldn't find a way to get past the guards at the entrance without them chasing me to my family's headquarters, depressed, I'm sorry. Mertella shook her head and kissed him affectionately on the forehead before looking into his eyes. Mertella. It's okay, I didn't want you to put yourself in danger either. They could notice at any moment and they'll immediately know who to suspect, smiling. Saying that, Mertella ran her hand over her slightly swollen belly, where her baby was currently located. Thank you, hugging her. Mertella let the black-haired man rest his head on her chest while she continued playing with his hair, enjoying their moment alone after 2 months without seeing each other. Mertella. I already thought of a name for the baby, looking at her. Oh really? I brought a list of good names, there are some you might like, if you take a look I'm sure. Mertella. I already thought about it, it's not up for discussion, smiling proudly. I understand and what is it? Mertella. His name will be Bell, smiling with satisfaction. Bell? You mean that? Mertella. Exactly, Alfia liked it too, so that's the one, smiling. Okay, I like it, it's a good name although I still think you should take a look at my list. Before finishing speaking, Mertella silenced him with a soft kiss on his lips that made the black-haired boy blush strongly. And before he could react, Mertella had already separated herself while giving him a small smile full of happiness and a hint of mockery. Mertella. You should stop being embarrassed every time I kiss you. At this point, it should be normal for us, don't you think? Why yes, it's just that I'm still embarrassed that a beautiful woman like you kisses me, blushing. Mertella laughed softly and this time she rested her head on her lover's chest. Mertella. Well, start getting used to it. In 7 months we'll be parents. I can't keep calling you by your last name just because you're embarrassed when I call you by your first name. Do you understand? Cranel kun, kissing him. Cranel. Hi. Blushing. Mertella laughed satisfied and hugged him again with a smile on her face. At any moment someone could appear and interrupt this beautiful moment she was having with her beloved. Pam. Oops, too late. Alfia. Mertella. I heard that bastard managed to infiltrate the White Palace again. If he's here and you hide him, I swear I'll, watching the scene. Mertella. Oops, I thought it would take longer because I hid my wheelchair, but I didn't take into account that they'll alert you for that, laughing amusedly. Cranel. Me, trembling. Crash. Cranel was excited when he heard the ground beneath Alfia crack and understood perfectly what it meant. Mertella did too and sighed with disappointment, knowing it was time for her beloved to run for his life. She wanted to keep hugging him, but it was that or leave her baby without a father. She opened her arms, freeing him from the hug and giving him free rein to start running. Neither slow nor foolish, the red-eyed level 4 fled and with surprising agility passed by the imposing figure of Alfia, who tried to hold him, failing in the attempt. Alfia. You bucking bastard, come back here. Mertella just lay on her bed with an amused smile on her face, listening as the whole family became alerted to him's arrival and went to look for him. Mertella. I wonder how he'll get in next time and how big you'll be by then, rubbing her belly. What do you say, my little Belle? How long do you think it will take Daddy to get back? Smiling. Mertella looked at the sky in silence and enjoyed the warmth of the sun that entered through her window, ignoring the cries of furious wars and the strong and quick footsteps of Cranel, escaping as only he could from a horde of level 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 adventurers. End. 01, the arrival of an angel. Boom crash boom. Run. Evilus is here. In the middle of a quiet street, a sudden explosion arose from inside a building, shaking its foundations and causing a raging fire that released a large cloud of smoke into the sky, perfectly visible from a distance. It was obvious to everyone who saw the smoke what was happening. Evilus had reappeared. The one who had alerted of the presence of Evilus after the explosion was a black-haired man dressed as an attendant with black gloves. He was a guild worker. Behind him was a completely destroyed and burned area, along with a couple of exploded and burning bodies due to the explosion. Judging by their clothing, they were more guild workers who were there. And they weren't the only ones. The whole building was full of these people, defenseless people without the ability to defend themselves, and there was no guard of any kind here. Why? Because the location was secret, but apparently it wasn't secret anymore. All the other workers who had not been affected by the explosion ran alarmed and terrified towards the emergency exits, knowing that being trapped by Evilus meant a slow and painful death. None of them had the blessing of a god, they were completely normal beings without any ability to defend themselves from external attacks. His boss, the black-haired man, was in charge of that secret location of the guild where they managed and protected part of the money that the guild generated and gave. Unfortunately, now he could do nothing to escape because a woman with spiky pink hair and bright yellow eyes had him held by the head with a dagger pointing at his neck while smiling sadistically. At their sides were several masked people with weapons in hand who launched themselves to hunt down and kill all the union workers who tried to escape, stabbing the poor workers in the back who tried to escape desperately. The black-haired man looked horrified before being roughly pulled by the pink-haired woman who lifted him off the ground by the hair and forcing him to look into her eyes. Fucking bastards, I was wondering why when we robbed the guild banks we found so little money, hitting him. The pink-haired woman hit him in the face with fun, knocking out a tooth of the man who felt as if his jaw was shattered with that blow, an adventure, and surely one of a level higher than level 1. The Valletta grade, spitting blood, please, I'm just doing my job, take everything you want, but please, I have family, children and… Slash. Before the man could finish speaking, the edge of a dagger stabbed him in the neck, he opened his eyes in shock and stammered a few words, while blood dripped from his mouth. The man raised his hands as best he could and grabbed Valletta's arm, who was holding the knife that was piercing her neck tightly. The man tried to move Valletta's arm away, but he could do little or nothing against a level 4 adventurer. The man choked on his own blood and slowly stopped struggling. Finally his arms gave way and fell inert under the satisfying gaze of Valletta, who enjoyed and watched with pleasure the terror in his eyes as he died. Valletta. Kill as many as you can, dropping the body, don't worry if you don't kill everyone, the leftovers will be useful to us later, laughing. Valletta laughed in amusement watching the chaos around her, seeing her subordinates murder in cold blood the guild workers who were trying to escape. But before he could continue enjoying the massacre, his gaze abruptly changed and his sight was fixed on a bear-like man who silently approached one of his subordinates who was carrying bombs. "Valletta. Idiot behind you." Screaming. The subordinate had no time to react when a bear-like man abruptly attacked him from behind, knocking him to the ground and taking away 2 bombs he was holding. "Valletta. You piece of shit." Annoyed. The bear man ran hard, covering his head with his arm, and grunted in pain as several pairs of throwing daggers buried themselves in his right side and in his arm that covered his face and neck. The pain was intense, but he didn't stop running and pushed hard at any Valletta subordinate that got in his way. Valletta also rushed to stop him, its level 4 status allowed it to reach him quickly, but it was too late, the man fulfilled his mission. Several of Valletta's subordinates watched in surprise and horror as the beastman launched himself at them and the bomb trap they were preparing for when one of the families who were in charge of stopping them arrived. They were about to call their companions to bring some hostages and tie them to the bombs as bait, but before they could do so the beastman activated both bombs in his hands which were activated immediately. Boom boom boom. Valletta covered himself with his arms, he barely received the explosion, he wasn't as close as his other subordinates, so the damage was less, of course, his subordinates weren't as lucky. Valletta gritted her teeth in annoyance and growled furiously seeing more than 50 kilos of explosives lost, everything they had brought, so much explosive could have killed a level 4 or even seriously injured a level 6, a death trap hidden by stupid hostages who would not say anything, just so they would try to save them. All that lost by a stupid bear man. However, Valletta did not have time to harden himself further as he watched several Union workers use the hole made by the explosion as a quicker escape route to flee. Valletta. Damn it. Kill them all. Furious, those who have the loot, come with me. There's no point in being here anymore, but at least we can get rid of all this trash. Irritated. Valletta left the site angrily, sneaking through a tunnel that was immediately collapsed and hidden among several pieces of debris from the building. Meanwhile, several guild workers escaped as best they could from Valletta's subordinates. However, even after several of them left with Valletta, the few that remained were still people with faults much stronger than them. They couldn't defend themselves, they didn't have the strength or the courage to do so, they could only run and hope to survive, while smelling the unpleasant odor of burning flesh and blood. At that point, several of the guild workers joined together to drive away the Aiz Waldstein members and go to the exit to escape together. They had managed to evade and even drive away several Aiz Waldstein members only to escape. Unfortunately, their hopes began to die when they saw a group of Aiz Waldstein covering the exit, waiting for them with weapons and ready to kill them. It would be their end, cornered and with no way out they had no chance of getting out alive. Several of them were already resigning themselves to dying, however before they lost hope one of the Aiz Waldstein members fell to the ground unconscious with his cheek red when a strong blow took him by surprise. The other members of Aiz Waldstein turned in surprise when they were attacked from behind and saw behind them a woman with blue hair and eyes with a serious look on her face. The girl quickly launched another direct blow to the chest of another member of Aiz Waldstein who felt the air escape from his lungs, falling to his knees and receiving a kick to the chin that sent him to sleep immediately. He lowered the frightened gaze of his companions and the hopeful looks of the workers. They all knew her, an extremely strong level 3 adventurer who patrolled the streets always defending people from assaults or attacks, the younger sister of the captain of the Ganesha family, Arti Varma. Damn it, take a hostage or something, exalted. Arti. No, of course not, it would be. Arti stomped on the foot of the subordinate who tried to go for a hostage and knocked him to the ground hard before dodging a blow to his head and sweeping his attacker's legs, knocking him out with a kick. The group leader grunted in annoyance but knew he couldn't take on a level 3 adventurer, none of them even if they worked together, plus Arti had moved them away from the escape zone they had tried to obstruct and kept them away so the workers could escape. Arti. Hurry up and go, seriously. The guild workers nodded gratefully and ran as best they could toward the exit of the building while they listened to Arti fighting on his own, holding back the Aiz Waldstein members so that the others could escape. Arti. Damn, I chose a great day to patrol without my sister, sweating. Arti ducked, dodging a blow that was coming towards his head and grabbed the boss's arm, pulling him towards him and pushing him with his back, then knocking him to the ground and twisting his arm to prevent him from getting up. Damn it. Struggling. Arti. Stay still, if you keep trying to get up I'll break your arm, it would be. Arti twisted the man's arm slightly more, who grunted in pain and stopped struggling, knowing it was useless. Arti. Okay, don't try anything else, my family will arrive soon and all your companions are fainted or injured, you are alone, looking at him. Yes, there is no one left, smiling mockingly. Arti opened his eyes in shock and looked up at the exit without seeing anyone, everyone had already left and he couldn't see or know if any of the Aiz Waldstein members had also escaped, so he didn't know if the man was telling the truth, but he couldn't risk it either. Artie looked down ready to feint the man she was holding, but before doing so she felt the man move abruptly and his arm slip, turning slightly and kicking her in the torso that forced her to move away a little and hold her stomach in pain. "Artie? Did you break your own arm?" Recovering from the pain. The man did not respond and simply fled the scene holding his arm in pain as he fled. Artie clenched her fists and gathered herself to chase him, but before doing so she looked uncertainly at the exit of the building through which the guild members had fled. She wasn't sure that one of them had escaped. She had been sure that she had stopped them all, but what if she hadn't? Now was not the time to have those doubts. I had to decide, and quickly. Artie gritted his teeth and ran towards the man's direction to chase him. He seemed to be the leader of his team, so he should be the one who had the most answers. She also trusted her abilities. She didn't think she had let any of them escape. She was sure she had knocked them all out hard enough for them to be unconscious for an hour or two, much more than enough for her family to arrive and arrest them. With that in mind, Artie chased the man along the route he had left, leaving the building behind. Unfortunately, Artie had not taken into account that one of those members of Evil's had been hiding since the moment he appeared and had slipped away alongside the guild workers, sneaking in among them and then murdering them. Unfortunately for him, the man didn't take into account that all the guild workers would separate as soon as they left the building, each one running in a different direction from his own. He couldn't chase them all and he couldn't risk being discovered. At any moment, a member of the Ganesha family or any other family could appear and they would catch him immediately. He couldn't risk hunting them all down, but he would at least make sure to kill one. He had to, or Valletta would make sure to kill him for coming up empty-handed. The man looked up and grunted in annoyance, as several of the guild workers had already escaped away from him. The only option left was. The man set his sights on a woman with a lame leg who was desperately trying to run. She seemed to have hurt herself while her fellow Evil's members were trying to hunt them down. The man smiled with pleasure. The perfect victim to take to Valletta. The Evil's member calmly approached the guild worker. There was no hurry, even walking he was going at the same speed as her, there was no escape from him. But it shouldn't be delayed too long either. The man quickened his pace and approached the woman who turned around to see that no one was following her, becoming scared and terrified when she saw a hooded man approaching her with a smile. She knew it was evil. The man looked up and let the woman see his brown eyes that observed her with indifference. He did not consider her a living being, just a result of his mission. The woman quickened her pace as best she could and forced her leg to quicken her pace, even though it hurt, even though she suffered, she wanted to escape with her life. The man just looked at her indifferently, with a small amused smile on his face, as he saw how the woman became desperate as she saw him getting closer and closer, how her eyes filled with terror with each step he took, how she herself imagined her death with the sound each of his steps made as he approached her. "Please, no," trembling. "It's just the job's hazards, don't take it personally, darling," smiling, "believe me, if it were just me I would have preferred to have a little fun with you before killing you," licking his lips, "You're a beautiful elf, unfortunately I have to hurry, so be grateful, this will be quick," unsheathing a knife. The woman retreated in horror, pleading for her life, asking to be allowed to live for her daughter and family, pleas that only increased the satisfaction of the man who stopped in front of the woman, watching as she closed her eyes tightly and covered herself with her hands in fear. A pathetic attempt to survive. Slash. The woman opened her eyes in shock and tried to scream, but felt a large hand cover her mouth tightly, preventing her from screaming because of the knife buried in her stomach. Stupid elf. The man held the knife firmly and slowly rotated it in the woman's stomach. The woman opened her eyes in pain and grabbed the man's arm in an attempt to stop him. The man was about to pull the knife out of her stomach and stab her again, but before doing so, he received a sudden blow to the cheek that forced him to drop the knife and step back, holding his mouth in pain. "Fuck. In pain, you made me bite my tongue." Raising his head. The man looked up at his attacker and could make out a white-haired, red-eyed boy running towards his clenched fist. The man opened his eyes in surprise and raised his arms to cover his face, however his surprise increased when he felt a foot hit his crotch and immediately felt a stabbing pain that reached his stomach. The man fell to his knees, covering his crotch, feeling an intense pain that regurgitated his stomach before he vomited. It was only his level 1 status that kept him from passing out, although at this point the man would have preferred to faint from the pain. Bastard piece of shit, writhing in pain. The man looked up as best he could, seeing the white-haired boy carry the woman in his arms and run quickly through the alleys, quickly disappearing from his sight. The man continued kneeling in pain, his head on the ground, completely still, waiting for the pain to go away. Running through the alleys of Riveria was a white-haired boy carrying in his arms an elf with jade-colored hair and eyes with a knife buried in her stomach. "Who are you?" "Dying." The boy looked down at her, looking into her eyes and allowing her to see his ruby red eyes. "Bell. My name is Bell Cranel," looking at her, "What is your name?" "Ina. I am Ina Tull, breathing heavily. What is such a young child doing walking through such dangerous streets? Tired. Bell. I was looking for a family to join, please stay awake, I'll take you to the hospital, you'll be fine I assure you, looking at her. The woman raised her head, seeing Bell in silence. She wanted to tell him not to waste his time or put himself in danger for her, but he looked so determined and sure that they would succeed that she didn't want to contradict him. She just did her best to stay awake, watching Bell get closer and closer to the Aiz family hospital. He had to hurry, he hadn't removed the knife buried in Ina's stomach to prevent her from bleeding out and losing blood, which had worked, if not for that she would have bled out much faster and probably would have died already. Bell. Hang in there, they'll cure you soon, looking at her. Ina. Too, looking at him, I have a daughter, breathing heavily, she is 15 years old, her name is Ina, and my husband they live in the commercial district, in a black stone house with a brown roof, tell them I'm here, tell them I'm alive, squirming. The woman held her wound in pain, feeling the pain becoming more acute with each second. Bell. Okay, I promise, looking at her. Ina smiled weakly in gratitude at Bell before closing her eyes in pain and resting. Aiz Hospital. In the Aiz family hospital, there was a girl with silver hair and violet eyes, writing down information about the status of several patients in a notebook in her hands. She was Ermid Tiesener, currently one of the best doctors that existed in Arario. She had recently managed to level up to 2 and enhance her healing magic, becoming one of the best healers, even capable of healing wounds made by cursed weapons. She was a spectacular doctor, which is why her god thought of making her captain of her family. None of that really mattered to her, she was a woman very focused on her work, she didn't care about honorifics or rank, she really tried hard just to keep her patients safe. But enough of the talk, it was time for him to get ready, the rumors were coming almost as fast as sound, and besides having heard the loud explosion in the distance, he had also heard that the person responsible had been Evil's who had blown up a secret money warehouse that belonged to the guild. He had to seriously prepare to receive the wounded, he was more than sure that he would receive several people and would do everything possible to save their lives, he already had several nurses and doctors ready to attend to any wounded who might arrive. Ermid approached the entrance and waited seriously for the door to open. Finally the door opened and she immediately approached to help transport the wounded, however she couldn't help but look in surprise at a 10-year-old boy at the entrance of the hospital, while he carried in his arms a dying elf with hair and eyes the color of jade, with a knife stuck in her stomach. Ermid. A child. Surprised. Bell looked up at Ermid and carefully raised his arms so that his gaze would focus on Ina, who opened her eyes when she felt that Bell had stopped running, seeing in front of her a 16-year-old girl with silver hair and violet eyes whom she could recognize. Ina Ermid Tiesener, sore. Ermid reacted quickly and approached with a stretcher to transport the woman, placing her on the stretcher with the help of the boy who followed her orders without question at all times until she took her to a secluded room, removing the knife, disinfecting and treating the wound quickly and effectively. Ermid continued checking several more signs of the elf, making sure that she remained in good condition under the child's watchful eye. Ermid. She'll be fine, her condition isn't serious, her foot was injured, but nothing fatal, she'll just need a bandage and to rest a little, the knife wound didn't reach any vital organs and the blood loss was little, well done for not removing the knife, she would have bled to death if you had, looking at him with a smile. Bell looked up and smiled back, pleased that he had accomplished his task. Ermid. Is she your mom? Looking at him. Bell shook his head and looked at Ina who was resting at the moment. Bell. She's a worker from the building that exploded, a man tried to kill her, he stabbed her in the stomach and I defended her, I pushed him away and came running over here, I didn't see him following us, so I thought we'd be okay, looking at her, was she okay? Ermid sighed with a small smile before gently rubbing the boy's head. Ermid. You did great, little one, smiling gently. Ermid turned to the door of the room seeing some more members of her family who were looking at her expectantly, she made a gesture with her hand and they all responded by shaking their heads, no one else had arrived at the hospital, so either there were no injuries or everyone had died, she would pray that it was the former. Then he made another sign and everyone became serious and left the area, the boy had escaped from a member of Evil's, but they were not sure if someone had followed him, they had to put security and call reinforcements in case members of Evil's appeared. Ermid. Do you know if he has a family? Rubbing her head. Bell nodded and raised his head, looking into Ermid's face, allowing her to see her beautiful ruby eyes, that couldn't help but leave Ermid in awe. Bell. She said she had a husband and daughter, they live in the commercial district in a big house made of black stone and brown roofs, she just said that, looking at her. Ermid closed her eyes thoughtfully, that description should be enough to find her house and her family, the information was useful. Ermid. Very well, thank you little one. Bell, I'm Bell Cranel, looking at her. Ermid. Bell, I see, very well, thank you little Bell, smiling, you did well, stay here and take care of her, I will take care of informing her family I promise, leaving. Airmid left the room leaving Bell alone who watched Ina sleep while she recovered from her injuries. In the end, with nothing to do he sat next to Ina's stretcher to wait, staying awake in case she woke up at some point. At the hospital, Airmid stood outside the hospital with a completely serious face next to the entrance, patiently overcoming someone. Finally that someone arrived and Airmid could see a girl with reddish hair accompanied by an elf with blonde hair, both escorting a man with brown hair and eyes and a girl of the same age with brown hair and green eyes with glasses, who quickly approached her as soon as she saw her. My mother. How is she? Worried. Airmid. Ina-san, right. Yes, your mother is fine. Fortunately, she didn't suffer any serious injuries and received the necessary care with plenty of time. You can thank your little savior for rescuing her from the man who tried to kill her and bringing her here. Looking at them, come in. You're in the first room. Letting them in. Both father and daughter quickly entered worried under the gaze of Airmid, who turned to see the red-haired girl, accompanied by the blonde-haired elf. Airmid. Thank you for escorting them here, it was too dangerous to just call them, and they could be coiled at any moment, looking at them, thank you Astraea family. The red-haired girl smiled happily, placing her hands on her waist. Allies. Come on, it's nothing, it's not like we had anything else to do, there were no more injuries, and Artie captured almost all the Evil Aiz members who were there. His older sister tried to investigate Valletta's escape route, but didn't find anything, sighing, anyway, whenever you need something your dear friend Allies Lavelle will always be there for you, smiling proudly. Don't be so proud Allies, tired. Allies. Come on, don't be so serious Lion, smiling, it's true that we couldn't save some, but it was very lucky that there weren't so many injured, and that the only injured one came out alive and with only minor injuries, rescued by a little boy, looking at the hospital entrance, what's the boy like? Looking at Airmid. Airmid. He is a 10-year-old boy, with white hair and red eyes, he said his name is Bell, apparently he arrived just when the man stabbed Ina-san and hit him by surprise before escaping, looking at her. Allies. Phew, what a brave boy, he took that risk just to save the lady, huh, smiling, like a little hero, smiling. Ryuu. Don't mention that, you'll only embarrass him, looking at her, and it's not right for a child to take so many risks, he could have died, would be. Allies. Pouting, and can we see the baby? Smiling. Airmid. Thoughtful, I guess it's okay, just remember not to make noise please, looking at them. Allies nodded with a smile while Ryuu nodded tired by the hyperactive and curious way of being of her captain, she only had to follow her and enter the hospital with her to see the little hero, or as Alice called him. The cute bunny. It was Alice's first comment when they first saw Bell. Ryuu had covered her mouth immediately, ashamed of her captain's sincerity, every day she was more sure that she felt no shame. She had also thought so when she saw him, hair as white as snow and eyes as red as ruby, she could have perfectly associated him with an Almira. Even so, it was rude to say it openly, even more so in front of that person who could take it as an offense. Of course, her captain didn't care in the least, and with a sincerity that was always present in her words, she said what everyone had thought when they saw the white-haired boy. Surprisingly, the boy smiled amused by his words and agreed with him with grace, as if he himself frequently thought the same thing and agreed. Well, the boy is understanding, luckily for Alice or else Ryuu would have had to scold her for offending someone again. Unfortunately for the child, not being offended by Alice's words would only cause him to. Alice. AWWW you're so cute, hugging him. Alice suddenly appeared in front of the child and picked him up in her arms, hugging him tightly with rosy cheeks. Not even 10 seconds later, she had already grown fond of the human Almrich. Ryuu sighed tiredly watching Alice hug the rabbit boy as if he were a stuffed animal. He only smiled nervously, feeling how the hug prevented him from breathing. Ryuu. Alice, let go of the child before you kill him, approaching. Ryuu grabbed Alice's arm stopping her from killing the poor Almira who took a deep breath, relieving herself of feeling the beautiful oxygen return to her lungs. Alice. Hey Ryuu. Pouting, can't you see I'm trying to hug the bunny boy? Crossing her arms. Ryuu. You can't just hug him like that, you're going to scare him and almost choke him, don't you see? Pointing at him. Alice turned to see Bell who looked at them in silence with curiosity reflected in his eyes, giving more tenderness to Alice. Alice. Oh, I just see this adorable bunny boy asking to be hugged, hugging him. Bell became excited when he saw her approaching again and tried to escape, unfortunately he reacted slowly and Alice caught him in her arms for the second time, fortunately for him, this time Alice controlled herself more than before and hugged him more gently giving a pleasant feeling to Bell who closed his eyes, letting Alice hug him. Ryuu just sighed heavily as he saw the boy surrender to Alice and Alice continue to hug him, as if he were the most adorable stuffed animal she had ever visited. In a way he could understand why his captain had hugged him so affectionately. At that time it was not common to see such a peaceful and innocent child walking the streets of Aurario. Most people generally distrusted everyone, and you could see the lifeless and hopeless look in them, something depressing to see especially for a family like his that tried so hard to keep people safe. And for a girl like Alice who always smiled charismatically, it was saddening to see that, so seeing a child smile amused by her words was like a caress to the soul after seeing many bad things, especially because that child had the appearance of a rabbit. Okay, I had to stop calling him that even if it was only mentally. I felt like I was starting to offend the child by calling him a rabbit frequently, even though I did it in my mind. Ryuu decided to momentarily ignore his captivated captain and turned his gaze to see a family across the room. They were a brown-haired man next to a half-elf girl with glasses on either side of a stretcher, on which was an elf with jade-colored hair and eyes who was talking to them smiling. She and Alice had already been informed of what had happened since they were asked to go to the woman's family to see her at the hospital. Fortunately, he suffered minor injuries and his life was not in danger, but there were deaths. At least 5 of the 30 union workers had died, some due to the explosion, and others sacrificing themselves to give their colleagues a chance to escape. Ryuu clenched his fists and frowned. How come evil has always managed to sneak into an area so easily, and worse yet, how did they escape from the crime scene without leaving any evidence? No matter if they caught some of the evil's members, even if they gave information, by the time they revealed it, that information no longer existed. Those tunnels, those ways to go and escape, simply vanished as if they had never existed. It was annoying and frustrating how they could never locate them and how they always managed to catch them off guard. Alice. You look upset, is something wrong? Smiling. Ryuu. It's nothing, sighing, I was just thinking about how evil always manages to escape from us without leaving evidence, it's frustrating, and I'm starting to get tired of never finding anything, since we're wasting time for nothing, frustrated. Bell looked at Ryuu in silence before freeing himself from Alice's arms and getting a little closer to Ryuu, gently pulling on her cloak to get her attention. Being aware that elves didn't like to be touched, he thought it would be the best way to get her attention. Besides, he didn't know her name. Ryuu felt the gentle tug on her cloak and turned her gaze curiously seeing Bell next to her giving her a look of softness and compassion. Bell. Don't feel bad, Miss Elf. One of these days you'll find a trace of them and we'll capture them once and for all, smiling. Ryuu. Ryuu looked at him silently for a few seconds before taking him in his arms and hugging him gently like Alice a few seconds ago. Ryuu. Yes, she is adorable, calm. Alice. True, nodding in agreement. Ryuu. Although there is something that intrigues me, did you say we will capture? Looking at him. Bell. Yes, because I'm going to become an adventurer and I'll help them very soon to find and capture evil once and for all, smiling convincingly. Ryuu looked at Bell for a few seconds with concern for this gentle boy who had a noble fantasy in his head, one that could cause him great suffering in the dark and cruel era they were now in. Ryuu. I don't want to belittle your effort, looking at the elf who was modest, or break your illusions, but I don't think that a child as gentle as you should try to be an adventurer, much less in a time as dark as this one, looking at him, do you understand? Bell. But I want to help people, motivated, and I'm close to getting a family, smiling. Ryuu. Really? Surprised. Bell. Well, I'm about to finish trying to ask to join the families in the East Zone, but I still have the South Zone left, although there aren't many families there, but one of them should be able to accept me, motivated. Ryuu was excited when he heard the word Southern Zone. Wasn't that where the Pleasure District was located? Was the boy aware of what kind of families were there? It seemed not, and from what he'd said, she was almost certain he'd tried every family they'd joined in the Eastern Zone. So she was desperate to join a family, she didn't seem to care what kind of family it was anymore, and that was bad, it could lead her to bad places if she didn't pay attention to where she was going. But she was undecided what to do. They also knew from Aramid that the boy had no family here in Aurario, so he had come from outside Aurario. And from what he suspected was a newcomer, he had come on his own to become an adventurer without taking into account that they were in the worst time to come to Aurario, without caring about the danger or the risks. He came alone and wandered through the streets of Aurario, looking to enter some family. Yes, he was a dumb rabbit, they definitely couldn't let him wander around there alone, he was a danger to himself. Ryuu stopped hugging Bell and looked at him thoughtfully about what to do. At this point, she couldn't think of any other solution than to leave him in an orphanage to be cared for. She looked 10 years old, so at that age, she should be more than welcome in an orphanage, as long as she acted as an older brother to the other children. Ryuu was brought out of her thoughts when Alice spoke to her, drawing her attention. Alice. Look at the poor rabbit boy, approaching her, he is desperate for a family and is putting himself in danger. I'm sure if we left him in someone else's care he would run away alone to continue trying to join a family, and who knows, in the South Zone they might accept him because he is cute and he would be a good catch when he grows up. They would corrupt him in a place like that, not to mention that he could be accepted by a bad family or worse. Before joining a family evil as could appear and, looking at Ryuu. Ryuu closed her eyes frustrated by her captain knowing perfectly well what she wanted to do. Ryuu. Alice, you always come out with things the way you are, don't be so compulsive, it would be. Alice. But think about it a little, we're not going to leave him to his fate, right? He could end up hurt or working in the South, you don't want that for him, right? And seeing how much he wants to help and join a family, it's more than certain that one of those two will happen but. Alice smiled innocently looking at Ryuu's face who was slightly pressured by her captain's intentions. Alice. If a kind and gentle family full of on-chans would accept him and take care of him so that that wouldn't happen, I'm sure they could educate him to be a strong and respectable adventurer in the future and keep him away from dangers or raise him to be able to defeat them, smiling proudly, although of course, that is only if that generous and gentle family receives the acceptance of the serious and responsible Alf of the family to integrate him, moving away a little. Ryuu frowned in annoyance and opened his eyes slightly, giving Alice a sharp look. She was a good manipulator when it suited her. Now, if something happened to the child in the future, it would be her fault. She was basically giving him the responsibility and there was nothing he could do. Besides, it was true, in this era it was very unlikely that any family would accept him, and the few options he had of being accepted were families that would use him for bad purposes, with all that she simply could not reject the idea anymore. Ryuu sighed tiredly and dropped her arms defeated, she didn't want anything to happen to the child, especially Alice didn't want that, and if it happened she knew she would be sad, and she didn't want to bear that responsibility either. With all that, what other option did she have? That's right, none. Ryuu. Very well Alice, you win, you can take the child to Astraea-sama to accept him into the family, defeated. Alice. Yee. Raising her arms victoriously. Bell looked at everything with curiosity without fully understanding what was happening, but soon he understood when Alice hugged him again tightly with an excited face. Alice. Good. You can join the Astraea family. Excited. Bell. Huh. Surprised. Bell looked at Alice in surprise at her words, while Ryuu was sitting on a stretcher, sighing at how manipulative her captain could be sometimes to get what she wanted. Ryuu looked up seeing Alice celebrating with Bell with excitement. But hey, I had already accepted it, I couldn't go back now, anyway, what could go wrong? End. 02, The Angel and Justice. Star Garden. The Garden of Stars. The seat and home of the Astraea family. The place where all the members of the family and their goddess lived, a beautiful and peaceful place, was not as big as many other headquarters, but it was more than perfect for the current members, it was also a renowned mansion that many called the most beautiful mansion in Arario. Yes, that was the mansion of the Astraea family. And Bell's current family. Ryuu and Alice were standing in a hallway outside a room with a closed door, in which a bright glow could be seen coming from inside. Alice had a big smile of victory on her face, while Ryuu had a look of complete defeat after hearing her goddess accept Alice's whim to join the little one to her family. Bell Cranel, they had formally introduced themselves after she accepted that he could join the family, and she had to admit that he was a lovely boy, his gentleness and kindness was purifying for anyone, and she couldn't say that she didn't regret Alice convincing her to join him to the family. Anyway, he didn't expect his own goddess to accept so quickly and become fond of Bell as well, it seemed that everyone was going to share the opinion that he was adorable and purifying. Well, at the moment they were the only ones who were in the seat of their family, and right now their goddess Astraea and Bell were in the room that emitted a glow from the door in which their goddess was putting her falna on Bell to formally join him to the family. They were just waiting for it to end. Alice. Are you ready? Looking at her. Ryuu. For what? Confused. Alice. To be a big sister, smiling confidently. Ryuu. Surprised. Alice Yufu, smiling. Astraea's room. In the room of the goddess Astraea. A strong white and light blue glow came from the center of the room, where Bell was lying face down with his shirt lifted, while a beautiful woman with brown hair and blue eyes behind him kept her hands on his back, placing his skirt. Finally the strong glow of Astraea's hands ceased and she stepped away from Bell, giving him room to stand up. Astraea. Very well Bell-kun, you can get up, smiling gently. Bell slowly got up from the bed and looked at his hands curiously, closing and opening his hand several times. Bell. I don't feel different, looking at Astraea. Astraea. Fufu, you may feel the same at first, but when you go to fight or train, you will notice the big difference, smiling. Bell. Understood, smiling. Astraea. And Bell, looking at him. Bell. Do you have it? Curious. Astraea. Don't get too confident now that you have a fauna. It's true that it makes a big difference when you get it, but still, be careful. There are many dangers out there that not even a fauna can protect you from. Do you understand? Seriously. L. Hi Kami-sama, Sirio. Astraea. Okay, smiling gently, you can call me Astraea if you want, smiling. Bell Kami-sama, looking at her. Astraea. We'll work on that later, drop of sweat. Streets of Riveria. In front of the building that Evil's had attacked the other day were a short man with blonde hair and blue eyes, an elf with jade-colored hair and eyes, and a bearded man with brown hair and a Viking helmet. A Palom, a high elf, and a dwarf. Three rare beings to see together, as they were the opposite of each other, but their reason for being together was simple and understandable, all three belonged to the same family. The family that had been formed for several years and of which they had been its first members, now its most important members, Captain Finn Damon, Vice Captain Riveria Ljos Alf, and the only senior executive Gareth Landrock. The three strongest members of the Loki family, and currently also some of the strongest adventurers in Riveria, all of them level 6, the best strategist, the best mage and the strongest, although the position of the strongest was still under debate, since there was another level 6 adventurer who was competing for the position of the strongest, although that was not important for now. What was important was what the three of them did there. The Palom, Finn Damon, looked seriously at the destroyed building, in which Evil's had carried out an attack just a day ago. They had just finished searching inside the building, and although they found traces of Evil's, the footprints or clues disappeared halfway through, and it was simply impossible to find them. However, according to reports from the Valletta Grade Guild workers and their subordinates, they accessed the building through an underground tunnel, of which neither they nor the guild knew of its existence. That meant they had or created tunnels under the city to reach places they wanted more quickly. It was also an accessible escape route, especially since it was easy to hide. In that case, Evil's had knowledge of an underground route that they were completely unaware of, or they had someone capable of making those tunnels quickly so they could travel without being followed. He could also tell from the smell and texture of the walls that they had hidden their escape tunnel with light explosions, collapsing the tunnel when they were at a safe distance. If I had to bet, I would say that they did not have someone capable of making those tunnels quickly, so those tunnels were already there before and they had discovered their location and directions. That would be a problem, because it could mean that they had an underground structure underneath almost the entire city. Considering that their attacks have been at each end of the city, it meant that the tunnels run through the entire city underneath, and Evil's had a safe way of accessing almost everywhere. But it also had a disadvantage. Finn. Gareth, request a secret meeting with the guild. We need to give the information obtained. If Evil's still believes that we have not discovered his means of transport and escape, we can have an advantage, seriously. The dwarf nodded seriously and with a single jump landed on the roof of a nearby building and went at high speed in the direction of the guild. In Riveria, watching her, get a master cartographer and tell him we need his services. The jade-haired high elf stood motionless looking at the destroyed building with an expression of annoyance that Finn understood. Finn. Calm down, I know you're upset because Aina was attacked, but she's fine, her family is already with her, and her injuries were minor. You should worry about convincing Aina to get another job or finding her savior to thank him, looking at the building. Riveria clenched her fists but looked up and took a deep breath, calming herself. Riveria. It just bothers me, even more so because they couldn't find the culprit who harmed her, seriously, the one who escaped, sharpening her gaze. Finn. Calm down, I may be wrong, however I'm sure that to keep their underground escape routes even safer, their subordinates shouldn't know about them, only the one they're going to use at that moment. That means that whoever harmed Aina only knew the route they took to get here, and although that's bad because we won't be able to get more information, it's also useful because they won't be able to return to Evil's so easily, at least not without attracting attention. And we'll be able to capture them, looking at her. Riveria. I guess, sighing. Finn. Okay, you're calmer now. For a moment I thought you'd get all upset, laughing. Riveria. Snorting, I'm a long way from being like her when she throws a simple tantrum, sighing, that girl also needs to relax more, looking at the Tower of Babel. Finn. Another time. Riveria. Yes, she went to the dungeon again on her own, sighing. Finn. I'm not surprised anymore, smiling tiredly. Every day more children suffer from this war, and more succumb to anger, seeking to join a family just to be able to avenge their parents, looking at the destroyed building. Riveria. Looking at the building. Finn. Although there are some who still seem to hold on to hope, smiling, like the one who saved Aina, remember. Looking at her. Rivera. Yes, Ina told me about him when I went to visit her at the hospital. A boy with white hair and red eyes, thoughtful, said he looked 10 years old and that he helped her escape from evil as his member when he tried to kill her. I'm surprised and I'm grateful to him for saving Ina, smiling. It was little, but he acted completely different from how Aiz would do. Finn. Yes, she would have already charged at the guy with the first attack and tried to impale him with her sword, smiling nervously. That girl is sometimes scary. Riveria laughed softly and turned around, walking away to get what Finn had asked for. For his part, Finn remained silently observing the building. He put aside his thoughts about the blonde demon and focused on his mission again. Finn. If they destroy the tunnels after using them, that means they can only attack a specific place once, or at least reach that place only once. I don't think they will be able to make the tunnel again, and it would be a huge waste of money and resources. Thoughtful, so they can only attack a place once. If they already attacked each of the ends of area, they have already shown us that they have a range of the entire city. But they have already attacked different random areas far from each other. That means that the underground tunnels they have covered the entire city, but are not so many as to have several in a single area, or at least not in the far areas. Finn walked a little and approached the building again, entering it and inspecting the place. Finn. They took more than half of the money that was here. Looking around, I don't think they'll come back to steal what's left. It's not worth it for them anymore. Thoughtful, anyway, we need a map of the entire city and cross out the places they've already been to. There must be an underground passageway under a specific area, but how big is that area? 10 meters. No, it's very little and very expensive for whoever made the tunnels. 30 meters. I'm still far away, but not yet. 80 doesn't seem like it to me either, so 100 meters, yes, 100 square meters, still a different access in each area. Where it will be located I don't know yet. Thoughtful, anyway, we were able to confirm a lot of the information in this attack. Finn walked to a specific area of the building where there were 5 bodies covered with small white sheets. If you looked around the sides you could see hands or parts of the body burned and charred. All those who had been killed in the attack. Finn. I'm sorry for your bitterness, but I thank you for sacrificing yourselves to save your teammates and giving me all this information about Valletta's mistake. Looking at the bodies. Finn looked up and left the area in silence, still thinking about what to do. In his mind he already had a plan formed to find Evilas or guide them themselves to the next place where they would attack, to have a plan already made to stop and capture them. Finn. Let's see who beats who. Valletta, seriously. It was already 2 in the afternoon. 4 hours had passed since Finn, Riveria and Gareth had gone to investigate the exploded building. And a whole day since Bell joined the Astraea family. Which by the way received him peculiarly. Last night when all the remaining members of the Astraea family had returned from patrolling the streets or investigating the destroyed building, they were greeted by their kind goddess, their charismatic captain, the cold Ryuu, and a talking Almira. They all looked at a dark-skinned half-wolf girl who had said that as soon as she saw him. To her surprise, the boy took it well, although he found the description she gave him curious, since he did not know what an almrage was, but he associated it with a rabbit monster, receiving the affirmation of everyone there. After that they introduced him as the new member of the Astraea family. They had also explained how and why they had joined him to the family, revealing that it had been by the whim of their captain who managed to convince Ryuu, and after a brief conversation of the little one with Astraea who was delighted with him, they accepted him into the family. Yes, none of the girls were surprised that this happened on a whim of their captain. In fact, one of these days they expected her to arrive with new members, or even with an adopted son, just because she cared for him and wanted to take care of him or join him to the family. In fact, wasn't that exactly what was happening? Well, more or less, only instead of being a mother, she was now an older sister, or as she had forced the child to call her, Alai's knee. Yes, it really wasn't a surprise, although each one had a different opinion about having him in the family, even more so because he was a man. He would be the first man they would accept in their family, although after talking separately each one with the child they accepted him into the family. Just like Ryuu, each one quickly understood why their captain had quickly taken a liking to the boy, more than anything, because he seemed to want to protect her purity. Obviously, when they asked her in more detail, there was no shortage of bragging comments about how she had to protect the purity of a being as pure and gentle as her. Yes, they were already used to that. What happened next was peculiar. All night long. All holy night. Hugging and pulling the poor child who was bought with an adorable rabbit stuffed animal. Member after member, Bell passed from arms to arms until they finally stopped, only to fight over who would take it. Obviously there was no shortage of their captain getting into the war for the almrage, resulting in the winner being the strongest, having the privilege of hugging and pampering the Bellmrage under the envious gaze of her other companions. All this while being watched by Ryuu, Astraea and 2 other members of their family who had the highest ranks, a girl with black hair and soft purple eyes who wore a traditional kimono, Kaguya Gajano, a girl who came from the Middle East and was the vice captain of the Astraea family. At her side was a much smaller girl, of the Palom race. Her name was Lyra. She looked even a little smaller than Bell, but she was older, she had pink hair and eyes, and had a bored look on her face, as she watched all her members be easily defeated and forced to fight for the tenderness of a child. Yes, that was the proud and strict family that was in charge of protecting Aurelio from evil, and that was in charge of keeping hope in people. Terrible truth. The pink-haired Palom turned her gaze towards Ryuu with a tired face that Ryuu could recognize without even looking at it, making her sigh. Ryuu no me Myers Aussie, tired. Lyra. How the hell did he manage to convince you? Looking at her mockingly. Kagaya. I'm curious about that too, smiling amusedly. Ryuu sighed tiredly and saw her captain laughing shamelessly at her teammates while hugging the poor rabbit boy who could do little or nothing to free himself from the grip of an extremely strong level 3. Ryuu. You know how she is, she can become a great manipulator when she wants something. Looking at her made me feel responsible for him, closing his eyes. Kagaya. Why am I not surprised, laughing darkly. Lyra. Ugh, I understand, that's how she convinced me to join the family, darkening her gaze. Astraea. Yes, but it was for the best, wasn't it? Smiling, besides, this was also for the best. Look at that tender boy. What bad things could have happened to him if we hadn't accepted him into the family? I wouldn't have liked for such a pure child to end up in a bad place or worse, because we denied him the opportunity. Looking at him with a smile. Lyra. You only think the same as Alice, looking at her accusingly. Whatever, you already put your falna on her, what else are you going to do? Closing her eyes. Kagaya. So now we have a little brother? Smiling. Astraea. Look at Alice and you'll have your answer, smiling. Kagaya. I don't have to see it to know the answer, smiling. Lyra. Obviously, rolling her eyes. Ryuu looked expectantly at everything that was happening before suddenly getting up from the sofa, drawing the attention of her companions and her goddess, who saw her approach all the other members of her family and her captain, who were fighting over Bell. Alice. I already told you. Pulling Bell away from the others, the only one who can hug him whenever I want is me. Alice was about to say something else, but before she could do so a sudden blow to the head disconcerted her, and Bell was easily snatched from her arms. Alice. Hey. Who was the cheater? Turning around. Alice turned around in annoyance to see Kiki had given her the snitch, however her angry look changed when she saw the face of a very upset Ryuu holding Bell in her arms, before gently lowering them to the ground. Ryuu. Neither you nor anyone else can hug him whenever you want, don't you see that you're making the poor child uncomfortable? Annoyed. Alice. It's that, nervous. Ryuu. It's nothing, frowning. Bell. I don't mind, just don't fight please, nervous. Ryuu. You see how uncomfortable it makes him, pointing at him. Alice. I don't think it bothers him. Ryuu. Ah. Sharpening his gaze. Alice. No, nothing, looking down. Seeing their own captain being reprimanded, none of her teammates had the courage to contradict or challenge Ryuu and remained silent waiting for the scolding to end. All while being watched by Lyra, Kagaya and Astraea who watched everything closely. Astraea. Ah, there it goes again, laughing. Lyra. She always gets like that when she gets angry, looking. Kagaya. Lion has always been like this since we met her after all, smiling, let's see what she will do in her reprimand, looking. Returning to Ryuu, the aforementioned woman was standing with her hands on her waist and a frown in front of all her family members who listened in silence and with their heads lowered to her reprimand. Ryuu. I can't believe you're so immature as to treat a small child as if he were a stuffed animal, frowning, you're supposed to be the protectors of Aurelio, the representatives of justice, and you're fighting over a child, crossing your arms, besides it's too late, and we get up early to be ready in the morning for any moment in which evil appears, it would be, the child also needs to sleep, and you're here just pulling him from one side to another, as if he were a toy, he needs to sleep. And all of you too, firm. All. Hi Mama Lion. Ryuu snorted in annoyance and turned around, taking Bell by the hand and leading him to the rooms to assign him one, under the gaze of the other members of her family who just watched in silence, knowing that if they said anything that questioned Ryuu and she heard them, she would give them a worse reprimand or even a punishment. Alice knew it. Not for nothing one day she had to clean the whole mansion after having a big party for her level up and making a huge mess that she regretted shortly after. At first Ryuu just scolded her, but it was after she bragged that being the captain they couldn't scold her that Ryuu punished her, showing her how much she cared about her status as captain. Nobody wanted to provoke her anger again, nobody wanted to see a fierce elven warrior angry, they already knew what she was capable of and decided to just listen to her. Tomorrow her anger would pass, that's what they hoped. Back with Ryuu and Bell. Both were walking through the corridors of the Garden of Stars in the area of the family rooms. After passing some doors that had decorations and names they arrived at a part where the doors were simple and nameless, empty rooms apparently, they were also few since the mansion was not of a huge size. About 4 unnamed doors, 4 rooms available for use. Ryuu approached the first nameless door to open it. Bell looked around curiously admiring the place. The cabin where he lived with his grandfather was not that big, and they only had one extra room besides his and his grandfather's, although they turned that extra room into a mini library full of hero books. It wasn't really that big a cabin. So being in a place like this that for many was a small mansion, for Bell was the biggest home he had ever seen, and it was fascinating. He saw the doors next to his that had names, several had specific details like a different material or color of the door, in addition to the name. Peculiarly, the door that was next to him was a soft brown wood with a name in gold. Bell. Salty Srowa. While Bell was examining the place excitedly, Ryuu was unlocking the door of the room that seemed to have a lock. Ryuu. That's strange, the rooms we don't use should be unlocked, forcing the lock. Finally, after putting in a little effort, Ryuu broke the lock and opened the room, drawing Bell's attention, who turned around curiously, looking at the room with a sparkle in his eyes, waiting to see what the place where he was going to sleep would be like. He expected something simple, being an unused room he didn't expect something so well equipped, but what he saw surprised him, and not only him, Ryuu also looked at the room with surprise. Ryuu? What? Surprised. Inside the room there was no simple room, nor an empty room. What was there were piles and piles of drop items from monsters of all kinds and classes. From dungeon floor 1 monster items to floor 40 monsters. The whole room was filled with monster items. In the room there were 2 large open chests filled with very valuable monster items. At first it seemed like whoever had left all of that there had tried to arrange it, but then they just left the items lying around the room. Ryuu. Where did all this come from? Entering. Ryuu let go of Bell's hand and entered the room in surprise, examining it. Hey. Bell and Ryuu turned around in surprise, seeing Colin at the entrance to the room where Lyra was standing with her hands on her waist and a frown. Lyra. What are you doing in my warehouse? Annoyed. Ryuu. Your storage room? This was one of the empty rooms, frowning. Lyra. Exactly. Nobody uses it. So I use it to store items I get from monsters. Crossing her arms. Ryuu sighed in annoyance and left the room, taking Bell by the hand and taking him to the next room. But before opening the door, Lyra quickly stepped out and stopped her again. Lyra. Wait. Stopping her. Ryuu. What? Tired. Lyra. That's where I keep my magical objects that I create, smiling proudly. Ryuu had a twitch in his eyebrow while emanating an aura of death that Lyra did not notice, but Bell did, who turned to look at her, getting excited when he saw her face of annoyance while she looked at Lyra. Lyra. What? Looking at her as if nothing happened. Use the next room, I haven't touched that one, leaving. Bell shivered slightly, feeling the atmosphere getting colder and darker. Ryuu raised his head and took a deep breath, calming himself down and going to the next room. Bell. I have a bad feeling, nervous. Ryuu opened the door to the third room and silently looked around the room filled with utensils for cooking, cleaning, sleeping, bathing, etc. Ryuu. Bell. Hey, I think they use this room as a general storage room, smiling nervously. Ryuu. Yes, I twitch, I think so, breathing heavily. They left the room again and went to the last door in the hallway. Bell was praying that the room was okay. He didn't care if it was empty, and he wasn't saying it for himself, but for the elf at his side who seemed about to explode. Finally the door to the last room opened. Bell opened his eyes slightly out of nerves as he watched the door slowly open. Finally, the door opened completely and Bell's eyes filled with relief at the sight of a completely empty room, filled only with dust. Ryuu also seemed to relax considerably upon seeing the empty room and relaxed his face with a deep sigh. Ryuu. Well, it's a little further from the other rooms, it's technically the last room, but if you need anything you can go to the nearby rooms, next to yours. This one is mine, you can ask me for help if you need it, and the first door is Alice's room, you can also ask her for help if you need it, I'm sure she'll give you priority, smiling softly. Bell. Hi, thank you, smiling. Ryuu nodded before closing the door, confusing Bell, who turned to look at her, confused. Ryuu. Well, today you're going to have to sleep in the living room. Looking at him, the room is very dirty and dusty, tomorrow we'll clean it and you can sleep here starting tomorrow. Bell. I understand, nodding. Ryuu. Okay, let's go get some sheets and pillows, smiling. Bell. Hi, smiling. Living room. It was already completely night. All the lights were already off and all the members of the Astraea family were already in their rooms to sleep. In the living room, the light was off and it was only illuminated by the moonlight coming in through some windows. There was Ryuu arranging some pillows on a long armchair and placing some white sheets. Ryuu. That's it, you can sleep here. Bell. Thank you, Miss Ryuu, smiling. Ryuu nodded and left the living room, leaving Bell alone, who lay down on the sofa and took the blanket to cover himself and sleep. But just when she closed her eyes to sleep, she heard the sound of footsteps and opened her eyes with curiosity, seeing Ryuu again, but now lying on the other long armchair, while she covered herself with some sheets and closed her eyes to sleep there. Bell. Miss Ryuu? Surprised. Ryuu? What's going on? Opening his eyes. Bell. Won't he sleep in his room? Confused. Ryuu. Not today, I'm going to sleep here to take care of you, getting comfortable. Bell. From Evilis? Surprised. Ryuu. No, from Alice, closing her eyes. Bell. End. 03, The Dark Blacksmith. Stardust Garden. In one of the rooms of the small mansion of the Astraea family, Bell was lying on an incredibly soft and comfortable bed while he slept. It was just dawn, but the sunlight was already rising slightly, illuminating the streets with a soft and tranquil white color that made the city seem at peace and calm. Some of that light entered through the window of the room where Bell was located and finally reached his face. Bell reacted slightly and wanted to turn around to avoid the sunlight, only to realize that he couldn't move. He opened his eyes, slowly getting used to the light of dawn, and once his eyes got used to the light, he could see perfectly where he was. He wasn't in the living room where he had slept the night before being cared for by Ryuu. Not even in that comfortable armchair that was even more comfortable than the bed in the cabin where he slept. He wasn't even wearing the light white sheets Ryuu had given him to cover himself from the cold. On the contrary, there was a female body larger than him and with great strength hugging him gently and firmly, giving him warmth. Bell opened his eyes in surprise and looked to the side of him to see Allies curled up next to him while hugging him like a soft plush toy. Bell. Allies knee. Surprised. Allies frowned slightly as she heard someone calling her name and also felt the light coming through the window hit her face. She gently opened her eyes, quickly getting used to the light and blinking slightly bewildered, looking around until she reached Bell and stared at him for a couple of seconds. Bell hello, smiling shyly. Allies. How are you Belmridge, yawning with a smile. Bell. Good morning, Allies knee. Didn't you sleep on the couch in the living room? Confused. Allies. Yes, but last night I brought you to my room so you could sleep somewhere more comfortable and warm, smiling. How is it? The bed is very soft, isn't it? Bell. Yes, remembering Ryuu's words, Allies knee you are a very direct girl about what she wants, looking at her. Allies. Everyone tells me, smiling amusedly, how about we go out? The others should be waking up right now, so let's hurry. Getting up quickly. Bell. Wait, he's still in his pajamas, stopping her. Allies. Looking at herself, oh, don't worry about that. You can pass me my sword. It's under the bed. Smiling. Bell nodded and crouched down to the ground looking for the sword under Alice's bed, seeing the sword nearby he took it in his hands and got up from the ground turning around to give it to Alice. Bell. Here surprised. Bell looked in surprise at Allies in her adventurer clothes and armor as she threw her pajamas into the laundry basket and turned around with a radiant smile as she took the sword from her hands. Allies. Thank you, putting it on. Bell continued to look at Alice in surprise at that speed, although it slightly embarrassed him to think that Allies had changed without caring that he was here, although she had done it incredibly quickly, that did not change the fact that she had been naked just a few steps away from him. There was no doubt, she was not only very direct, but also carefree. He was worried about how quickly he understood Ryuu's concern towards Allies, with such a direct and carefree attitude like that it was normal to worry about her. Bell. Where are we going? Curious. Allies. Well, let's go around the area so you can familiarize yourself with the area. Lion will get angry if we just walk around, so we'll go register you at the guild, smiling. Bell nodded calmly and followed Allies who opened the door with great care and silence, tiptoeing through the hallways while being followed by Bell who looked at her with amusement. As they passed through the corridors they arrived at the living room where they could both see Ryuu sleeping peacefully with a beautiful face worthy of an honorable elf. Allies. Let's go quietly without waking Lion, whispering. Bell nodded like an obedient soldier to the grace of Allies who passed slowly and stealthily through the living room while she was followed by Bell, who was sweating slightly nervously because he did not have the same experience and ability as Alice to go unnoticed. Fortunately, everything went smoothly and they were able to reach the other hallway that led to the exit of the mansion without waking Ryuu. Although that was the time when all the members of the Astraea family woke up approximately. Ryuu? Waking up. Ryuu already had a natural schedule set for waking up, so at that very moment she was naturally waking up. Allies' enhanced senses allowed her to pick up the sound of Ryuu waking up right at that moment, so she picked up Bell and quickly fled the mansion, abandoning stealth and carelessly closing the door. Ryuu, who was barely rubbing her eyes sleepily, woke up completely when she heard the sound of the entrance door closing with some force. She examined her surroundings and saw the armchair in which she had left Bell sleeping. Only it wasn't beautiful. Ryuu became slightly excited and quickly got up from his temporary bed, checking the couch where Bell had slept. It wasn't warm, so no one had been there for a while. In short, Bell hadn't slept there. Had he been kidnapped? No, if someone had entered here with bad intentions, it would have been more feasible to kill her than to steal a child. Besides, there weren't many adventurers of the same level as her who would be able to escape her sharp senses of adventure. And no one would be foolish enough to attack the headquarters of one of the families protecting her area. After all, this would immediately alert the other families that were strategically nearby. Not even the strongest of evilas would do something so desperate. Yes, he really didn't have to think much to know who it was and why. Ryuu Lion. Angrily. Already several meters away from the mansion, Bell and allies could hear Ryuu's furious voice saying Alice's name, which was not a good sign really. Allies? Let's ignore that, smiling nervously. Bell had to admit he was surprised by Alice's ability to keep smiling, knowing she was in for a stern reprimand upon her return. Allies going? Guild. In the Adventurers Guild, Bell and allies were just entering the large compound, seeing a huge mess inside. Guild workers running from side to side exhausted, while carrying piles of papers and important documents that they had to sign or deliver. Everything seemed disorganized and without order in general. Allies? That's strange. Looking around, there are usually more workers and order here. Confused. While allies observed the place, one of the guild workers with red hair and wolf ears looked at her and hurriedly approached to assist her, as if she were a priority. Bell was slightly excited when he saw a serene woman with red hair and wolf ears stand in front of allies, welcoming her. Allies? Oh, hello Rose, smiling. She is Rose Venet, a 21-year-old werewolf with red hair and vermilion eyes, who worked as an advisor at the guild. Oh, and she is Allies' advisor. Rose, hello Miss Allies. Has anything suspicious happened that you need to report to the guild? Concerned. Allies? No, none of that, smiling. Why is there so much commotion here? I see less people and more disorder. It almost looks like Kagaya's room, looking at the place. Rose. About that, sighing, after the attack on one of the guild's hidden vaults, several of those who worked in other hidden vaults worried about following the same fate. They saw that working for the hidden guild did not guarantee them a living, and many resigned. Allies opened her eyes in surprise upon hearing that. She knew that many would think about resigning after what happened in the vault, but she didn't imagine that the situation would get to such an extent. Rose. Then, to replace the losses, they sent the advisors and assistants who worked in the guild to the vaults, and that caused a mess. Without enough staff, the guild leader is busy figuring out how to restore order with a few employees left here, exhausted. Allies. I'm sorry to hear that, understanding. Rose. Okay, thanks, anyway I'll do my best to keep going for my family, smiling. Allies. I'm sure your husband and son appreciate your efforts, smiling. Rose thanked Alice for her words before her eyes caught a peculiar white hair in her field of vision and turned her gaze towards Bell, who was looking at her curiously, looking at her ears curiously. Rose. A boy. Confused. Bell. Hi, can I touch them? Pointing to his ears. Rose. Huh. And no, surprised, where did you come from? Surprised. Allies. Oh, about that, he's the newest member of the Astraea family. Smiling proudly. Rose. Rose remained in a sepulchral silence after hearing Allies' words, making the retreat nervous about her response. At one point, while Rose stared into her eyes with a blank look, she felt as if she had intentions of attacking her. Rose. Follow me. Rose turned around and walked towards one of the guild's private rooms in the back that they usually used to give private or important information to adventurers, information they didn't want to be divulged. Allies sweated nervously, knowing that going into that soundproof room where no one could hear your screams of pain and the angry shouts of your advisor scolding you would be a grave mistake. But not following him would be even more so. Besides, he would have to register Bell as part of his family, and Rose would not allow it until he convinced her, so running away was not a good strategy. With no other option, Allies resigned herself and decided to accept her fate, although that did not stop her from taking precautions. Soundproof room. In that soundproof room where no matter what, no one would hear the angry screams of your advisor scolding you, were Allies, Bell and Rose. Bell was at the height of Rose's face, looking at her with slight nervousness due to her fixed gaze on the. Allies was behind her, holding it in front of her like a protective shield that Rose couldn't get past. Rose. Allies, let's go of the child. Allies. No, it's the only thing that saves me from you, looking at her out of the corner of her eye. The vein popped on Rose's head and she frowned in annoyance, exasperating Allies and Bell, who realized that it was not a good idea to fool this woman. It seems that Allies also noticed that she had already hesitated too much and gently lowered Bell, sitting next to her while looking at Rose with slight nervousness. Rose took a deep breath to calm herself and looked at Allies and Bell more calmly. Rose. Why do you want to bring this child into your family? Seriously. Allies? Because it's very cute, smiling proudly. Rose's eyebrow twitched and Bell gently nudged Allies to say something else as he noticed a dark aura coming off Rose. Allies? Also because she may be in danger, nervous. Rose? What's that? Raising an eyebrow. Allies? He was close when the guild's secret cellar exploded. Looking at her, he confronted one of the Evil's members who had gone after one of the workers and managed to escape with her to the Sechdeh hospital. Looking at her, do you understand? Rose closed her eyes thoughtfully and nodded. Rose? The Evilist member that escaped was the one that didn't run away with Valletta's group, but we couldn't find him either. Looking at her, and I doubt the kid had anything to cover his identity, so she could easily go after him to take revenge on him and the woman. Sighing, very well, I understand a little the reasons for this, but it was still a very irresponsible thing to do. What did your family think about this? Allies? Well, Lion didn't completely agree, but after convincing her, we took him to Astraea-sama. She asked him a few questions and accepted him into the family, smiling. I'm going to train him myself, and maybe some other girl will also agree to help him and train him. I can easily convince Lion, although I don't know if it's a good idea for her to train a child, laughing nervously. Rose? She can't contain herself, closing her eyes. Has Astraea-sama already given her fauna? Looking at her. Allies? Yes, just register you're joining the family and the guild, smiling. Rose? The first man in the Astraea family, huh? Looking at her, I thought your family didn't accept men. Allies? Oh, don't see us as if we were the enemies of men, what are we? The Artemis family? Shaking her head, we have no problems with men, we simply do not accept malicious people or those with impure thoughts, that's why Astraea-sama's questions. Looking at her, believe it or not, we also rejected some women who only sought to take advantage of the status of the Astraea family. Rose? I understand, and don't you think he could become a bad man in the future? Staring at her. Allies shook her head without hesitation and smiled confidently. Allies? I'm sure if we raise him ourselves, we can make him a good man who will respect himself and be respectful, just like me, smiling proudly. Rose? You're anything but respectful. Allies? Understood. Rose? It's okay, if you had doubts about being able to raise him, I wouldn't have allowed you to join him and your family. Looking at her. Rose relaxed her gaze considerably, making Allies sigh, who stopped feeling pressure on her. Rose? And what do you think about this? Rose and Alice turned to look at Bell, realizing he wasn't sitting next to Allies. Allies' enhanced senses and Rose's keen hearing heard the sound of a book sliding off a shelf and turned their gaze in that direction, seeing Bell in a corner of the room where there was a bookshelf as he picked up a book with a blue cover. Rose? Curious. Bell took the blue cover book and showed it to both of them with a smile full of excitement. Bell. I want to buy it. Excited. Both red-haired women saw the cover of the book, which had Argonaut written in large letters across the top. Rose? I didn't know we had that here. Looking at the book. Allies? Oh. One of the heroes from the beginning, huh? Smiling. Do you like hero stories, Bell? Smiling. Bell nodded excitedly, not feeling ashamed to say his dream, he loved heroes and wanted to become one in the future. Rose? It's not an important document for the guild, you can take it if you want, take it as a gift for your bravery in helping that woman, smiling gently. Bell. Thank you, smiling. Allies? So? Rose sighed slightly and nodded. Rose. Very well, I will register you as part of the Astraea family, and following the tradition, looking at Bell, a small pleasure, my name is Rose Vanet, and from today I will be your advisor, smiling. Rose extended her hand to Bell, who took it with a friendly smile. Bell. I'm Bell Cranel, nice to meet you, Rose-san, smiling. After the introductions, Rose took out some registration papers where she asked Bell to write down her information and legally join her to the Astraea family. Star Garden. In the Astraea family mansion, Ryuu was sitting on the living room couch where she had slept, sighing tiredly while hiding her face with her hands. Beside him, Astraea rubbed his back gently with a nervous smile. Astraea. Well, look on the bright side. I'm sure she went to sign Bell up for the guild so you wouldn't get so mad at her. She probably also bought him a weapon or armor, so the day wasn't wasted. On the contrary, they made things faster, don't you think? Smiling doubtfully. Ryuu. Yes. I guess yes. Ryuu took a handkerchief that Astraea offered her and wiped her face full of dust from having cleaned Bell's now new room. Not only that, since she is a level 3 adventurer, it really wasn't difficult or time consuming for her to go buy a bed and even install it. After tidying up the room, she put sheets, some furniture like shelves, a closet, a nightstand and even an armor rack that they had in the room they used as a storage room. Yes, in the end she took charge of furnishing Bell's room completely herself. The original plan was for Bell to do it, yes, he had to be a little independent now that he was going to be an adventurer in this dangerous time, but it probably would have taken all day or would have required more time. So thinking about it, it would have taken a long time and they would have wasted valuable time. Instead, she was able to do it at a much faster speed, while Aiz was already in charge of registering Bell in the guild and maybe buying him an armor or weapon, in addition to showing him the area. Ryuu sighed again, thinking on the positive side, and after wiping the dust from her face, she got up from the sofa under the curious gaze of Astraea, who saw her move away a little. "Astraea, what are you going to do?" "Ryuu. Aiz prides herself on not wearing anything custom made unless it's a desperate situation. I'm sure that's going to influence Bell's choice of armor or weapon. It's going to take her all day to find a blacksmith to make her a custom armor, and she'll leave the weapon for tomorrow, so I'll go ahead, opening the exit door. First, she'll make sure it looks good and is protected, so she'll order the armor first. I'll go order the weapon today. I'll come back in a while, I don't know when exactly." Leaving. Astraea silently watched the door where Ryuu had left inside. "Astraea. Sometimes it scares me how easy it is for her to predict what Aiz will do." Looking at her. Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel, much of it was used by the Hephaestus family to sell their weapons of very good quality and power, although the situation of the time caused a great drop in their weapons, and in some cases weapons of lower quality that they voluntarily gave to the adventurers to arm them. Still, even if they dropped a lot in price, not many people even had that kind of money to compare them. Not many people went to the dungeon now, much less in solitary confinement. It was a sure ambush from Evilis. But leaving that aside. Aiz and Bell were walking through the corridors of the Tower of Babel while examining some weapons and armor displayed in some showcases, many of them silver and gold, quite large and striking, completely shiny, so much so that you could see your face reflected in them. Bell couldn't help but look at all the weapons with a gleam in his eyes, imposing and shining weapons and armor like the ones he once dreamed of trying. There was just one slight problem with all that armor and weapons I saw. They were too big for him. No matter how much they walked through the aisles, they only found armor for adults, and it was obvious, no child could buy armor of such caliber, so there were no armor of his size of such quality. He saw some small ones, but those were for a build even thinner than his, for a palom. Basically the small armors were too small for him and the large ones too big. Yes, definitely a problem. But Aiz didn't seem to care about that because she hadn't stopped walking at any time, they hadn't stopped since they arrived, and she didn't know where they were going. When she asked, Aiz just told her that she would find out soon. Finally they arrived at a completely different area where there were no luxurious shelves and shiny armor behind glass cabinets and few people. No, now they were in a much bigger place that was no longer like those hallways with pretty red and gold glass cabinets where there were top quality weapons. They were in a bigger place, dirty and grey but full of people, armor everywhere much simpler and exposed to the public without any showcase that could prevent you from touching it. They were not shiny armor nor much less imposing. The difference in quality was instant and noticeable to anyone. Aiz. This is the main blacksmith area of the Hephaestus family. This is where most of the novice blacksmiths looking to advance and sell their weapons are found. It is excellent for novices because of its very low prices, and if you know how to search, also because of its great quality despite its price. Smiling. Bell. Amazing, looking at the place. Aiz. I would prefer to buy you a first-class armor, but as you could notice in our tour, there would not be any that would fit you properly, and having an armor that fits you is essential in battle, so we will look for a competent blacksmith in this place, who will be able to forge better armor to suit you over time. Smiling. Bell. I understand, excited. Alice. Bell. Looking at her silently. Aiz. What are you waiting for? Aiz. Go find an armor you like. When you find it we will look for the blacksmith to forge a version tailored to you and make a contract. Smiling. Bell nodded excitedly and ran around the place examining and looking at armor. He walked around the place for a while looking for something he liked, but none of it was as pretty and shiny as the armor on the other floors. Obviously, the quality of the armor and weapons was different depending on the floor. Right now, he was on the cheapest one, so finding something surprising and eye-catching would be difficult. Although on second thought, maybe standing out too much wouldn't be a good idea. It was basically like being a scream to be seen immediately, so maybe being flashy wasn't something that was recommended. Just as Bell was deciding on a simple and not so striking armor, a peculiar glow coming from an area hidden among black cloaks caught his attention. Curious, he put aside the cloaks and entered the place, seeing horrible armor with scratches on the prices, which made it clear that they were selling them cheaper and cheaper. It was the place where they threw away the armor that no one wanted or that didn't sell. All of them looked much worse than any other, as if they were the first creations of the blacksmiths. But nothing looked shiny, so where had that peculiar glow that caught his attention come from? Just at that moment that same glow reappeared in his eyes and he turned quickly to see where it came from and he could see the glow coming from a box in the back, the most hidden one, covered from above with a black blanket on which on top he had another ugly armor that covered it. Bell pushed aside the armor that was on top of the box and removed the black blanket, opening his eyes slightly at the sight of a surprisingly light armor made of a shiny white metal which had some black lines on the foot and hand guards. Bell took the armor with a sparkle in his eyes and took it out of the box, looking at it from head to toe. It was obviously bigger than him, but he was looking for one that could be made to his size. The black blanket that covered the place moved again, revealing Allies, who looked at the place with curiosity until she saw Bell. Allies? Oh, there you are, I almost lost you for a moment. Approaching, I saw some pretty good red and green armor. If you take a look I'm sure you might like it. Looking at it, Although I see that you already found something, looking at the armor, it looks good, it matches you. Seeing the price, although it is a bit expensive to be in this section, or this floor even. Bell looked at the chest where the tag was and was surprised to see the price tag of almost 62,000 valis. Allies took the armor with curiosity, examining it completely. Allies. And it's also of a very high quality. Looking at it, the marks it has are the same marks as the incredibly resistant items that Lyra creates, like the shield she made herself for one of our members. Looking at it, although the marks are lighter, she must use the same blacksmithing style as Lyra to increase the resistance of an object. It's very light too, for a very light armor, it must also be very resistant. Smiling, it's perfect. You chose a very good armor, Bunny. Looking at it. Bell. Sorry, I didn't realize it was so expensive, scratching his neck. Allies. Oh, don't worry about that, I was thinking of buying you something better, but we wanted to find a blacksmith who would custom make things for you first, and I think we already found it. Looking at the armor. Allies and Bell were in front of the hall where all the armor in general will be charged, attended by a man who was not the leader of the place who was currently attending to another person. They were waiting for their turn until they realized that it was taking too long, and when they looked closely they realized that he was fighting with the man who was serving. I told you. How do you expect me to make a sale if you keep putting my armor hidden next to all that junk? Dwarf. You could start by lowering the ridiculous price of your unsold junk before demanding it here. Who do you think you are? A veteran blacksmith? You're just a novice, behave like one. I am much better than this, I have the same skill as a veteran blacksmith, but all you care about is the level. If I don't have the blacksmithing skill for you all it's cheap garbage. My armor is 100 times better than a level 2 and the same quality as a level 3 blacksmith. I will not lower my price for the quality I'm offering. The dwarf man frowned and gritted his teeth, as did the other man, whom Bell could notice had elven ears. Now he understood a little more, elves and dwarves never got along, from what he knew, so it didn't surprise him so much to see them fight. Looking at him from head to toe, she could see that he was an elf with white hair and the blackest eyes she had ever seen in her life. They looked like an abyss, his skin was a brown tone. Bell. A dark elf, looking at the man. Allies cough, pretending to cough. The dwarf who was serving turned his gaze and was surprised to see Allies across the hall with an impatient look. Dwarf. Look what you're doing, you're going to make us lose customers. Get your junk out of here and get out. I don't know why you take it out of that room if it won't sell. Turning around. Sorry for the wait, Miss Lovell. What do I owe your precious time in this place to? Smiling nervously. Allies? Yes, you see, a new member recently joined my family. He's a little small, so I want a blacksmith to forge a custom-made suit of armor. Do you know where the blacksmith who forged this is? Leaving the box on the shelf. The dwarf opened the box, looking at the armor with curiosity, and beyond being surprised by the price, he was surprised to see the signature of the blacksmith who had done the work. Dwarf. Shah. The dark elf who was on the other side of the hall, annoyed, collecting the armor he had forged and brought from the area where there was scrap, turned his gaze and saw the dwarf with annoyance. Shah. Now what do you want? Annoyed. Dwarf. They're looking for you, leaving. Shah. Huh. Confused. Allies. Hi. Smiling cheerfully, Shad isn't he? Shy Allies Lavelle, surprised, why yes miss, it's me, why? Nervous. Allies. I was looking for you for one of your armors, showing the box. Shah. A. Approaching. Shah looked at the box and opened it, seeing the armor that had been forged with surprise. Shah. B. But why? Confused. Allies. A new member recently joined my family and I wanted some armor for that person, but it's a bit small, so I want one made to measure and he likes this one. I would like you to make it to measure and if possible make a blacksmith contract with that person, smiling. Shah. Oh, of course. Excited, nothing would be a greater honor for a blacksmith than to forge armor for a renowned family, smiling, but are you sure? That's a very expensive armor, even for me, it's the most expensive I've ever made. Looking at it. Allies. Yes, my companion chose it and I really liked its quality, it's the best I've seen here, honestly, smiling. Sha. In that case it would be an honor to make a contract with someone from your family, Bound, I will introduce myself, I am Sha Darius, a dark elf. Allies? You already know me so there's no need for me to introduce myself, but the person you should meet is the one you're going to make a contract with, stepping aside. Allies moved to the side revealing Bell who looked at Sha with curiosity and vice versa. Sha. A child looking at him. Bell. Nice to meet you, I'm Bell Cranel, I'm sorry if your expectations were higher, but I'm the one who wants to make a contract with you, smiling embarrassed. Sha. Not at all, I've seen very strong adults and children capable of doing amazing things, like the rookie star of the Loki family. I hope to be a competent blacksmith for you, smiling softly. L. I hope to be a competent adventurer for you, extending his hand, sorry the elves don't. Sha took Bell's hand and shook it lightly in greeting while smiling confidently. Sha. A pleasure Sir Cranel, I am not like the stubborn and rustic elves you know, now that I will be your blacksmith, I will tell you my full name, I am Sha Darius, but I prefer that people call me Sha, standing up. Allies? Okay, the introductions are over, now we're going to sign a contract, smiling. Sha and Bell nodded and Sha took an old paper out of her bag. Sha. Here, you can read it and sign it if you want, I don't have many specifications, and I think you'll find them acceptable, handing it over. Allies? It's an old sheet, I see you've had it stored away for a while. Sha see. Bell read the contract with curiosity, seeing the specifications of the contract, the first was the most obvious, do not request armor or weapons, depending on your contract to another blacksmith, if you had a blacksmith who made armor for you from now on only the T would make armor, obviously life or death situations were an exception, if you were in danger, no one would reproach you for using another weapon. The second one seemed interesting but also made sense. If 5% of the monster items are materials you get on an expedition. Many blacksmiths didn't go to the dungeon that much, they preferred to stay on the surface and work, which is why many stayed as level 1, so for that they asked for expedition materials as part of their contract to get good materials to work with, in return, they gave you some discounts on armor just for you, pretty good discounts that no one would complain about. The last one was even stranger. The only thing it said was do not request to make spiritual weapons. Bell raised his eyebrow in confusion, not quite understanding what he was referring to. He knew about magic weapons, his grandfather had one which he used to light firewood, but he had never heard of a spiritual weapon. In any case, he didn't give it any importance, he didn't know them, so it wasn't something important to him nor counterproductive, he didn't see anything else in the contract, so he signed it under the gaze of allies, who also observed the last condition with curiosity. L. Ready, smiling. Sha. Well, saving it, in that case from now on I will be your blacksmith Sir Cranel, if you like you can follow me to my smithy, there I can take your measurements and start working immediately on the armor you request. Allies? Very well, let's go, smiling. Sha blacksmithing. The Hephaestus family also had some land purchased outside the Tower of Babel, mostly they were blacksmiths that they gave to their blacksmith so they could work, generally they were joint blacksmiths, so that even more than one blacksmith would use or share them, there were 3 work tables, 3 large furnaces and 3 of each tool, like roommates but in a blacksmith shop. Although only a couple of everything looked clean and frequently used, 2 of the blacksmith tables looked dusty and dirty, the same with the other 2 pairs of tools, as if they had not been used for a long time. Sha approached a large wooden box and opened it taking a tape measure and a notebook. He approached Bell and asked him to hold out his arms while he took his measurements and wrote them down. Allies just watched expectantly and with slight boredom. Sha. Very well, I already have your measurements, with this I can make the armor to your size, keeping the metric waist. Allies? When will you have it ready? I know it's a difficult armor to make. Sha. Certainly but it shouldn't take more than a day, it's not like I have urgent requests from anyone else to do, turning on the oven, Sir Cranel, do you want any color or design changes on the armor? I can do that if you like, looking at him. Bell. No, shaking his head, I really like your original design, smiling. Sha. Okay, nodding, in that case I'm going to start working now, you can leave if you want, it's going to get hot in here, tying a wet handkerchief around her head. Allies and Bell nodded and left the place while listening to the sound of the fire consuming the metal. Through the streets of Riveria, Bell and allies were walking back to the Star Garden. It was already a little late, but it was not yet past 5. Allies was mentally preparing herself for Ryuu's scolding while Bell was thoughtful. Bell. Allies knee, looking at her. Allies immediately snapped out of her thoughts to look at Bell. Allies? Yes. Smiling. Bell. Do you know what spiritual weapons are? Curious. Allies? Oh well, it seems a little logical that you don't know them, they are not very common, and there are not many people who are able to do them, you need a mandatory trait to be able to do them, walking. L. A mandatory feature. Curious. Allies. Yes, to make them you need to have a contract with a spirit, you are a newly level 1, so you may not have felt it, but the elf emanated a constant aura of very strong mana that only happens while you recite the chant of the magic, and you are first class, so a novice blacksmith like him emanating an aura like that without conjuring a magic only means that he has an established contract with a spirit, thoughtful. Bell's eyes lit up upon hearing that. If I knew they were spirits, beings of great power comparable to that of a first-class adventurer and in some cases greater. In ancient times before the gods descended to the earthly world, having a contract with a spirit was the closest thing to having a fauna. A spirit could give you its power and magic, which turned a normal person into a being of great power. There was an example of one of the heroes from the beginning, Argonaut with Jupiter, the spirit of lightning. L. So the blacksmith is very strong, surprised. Allies. Not enough to reach the level of a first class, but yes, he must have the strength of a level 3 at most, thoughtful, and he is a dark elf. Some time ago the kingdoms of the dark elves and the white elves collided and killed each other. If I am not mistaken, the kings of both kingdoms escaped and nothing is known about them, but there could have been survivors like that dark elf, thoughtful. L. What does it have to do with being a dark elf? Curious. Allies. The Dark Elves had a contract with a spirit, the spirit of darkness. In general it was the blacksmiths who had the contract to make spiritual swords, as a way to simulate the magic swords of the Krazo. Looking at it, so it makes some sense that he has a contract with a spirit. L. Oh, surprised, so their weapons are as strong as the Krazos. Allies. No, they are very different, starting with the fact that they could not forge weapons of other elements, only weapons of the element of the spirit with which they had a contract. Besides that, if the spirit wanted it could simply not lend its strength to the sword, and it would be completely useless. The power of a spiritual sword depends on the spirit. If there are many, the spirit must divide its power among all of them, and that makes them weaker. Besides that, the swords did not have a power as explosive as the magical Krazo swords. They were strong, but not at that level. Looking, we have arrived, now prepare for Lion's scolding. Remember, you must be my shield, smiling. LA. Where the hell were they? Hey Lion, how was your day? Don't avoid my question, allies. Wait. I have BAHHHHH. End. 04, Rookie Training. At Shah's blacksmith shop. The aforementioned was breathing with emotion and some sweat running down his face as he looked at his surprised allies and Bell. Shah. Here is your armor, holding it out. Bell broke the box with curiosity and looked inside with excitement. Bell. It's just how I wanted it, smiling, but are you okay? Worried. Shah. Of course. Why do you say that? Allies. You look terrible, looking at him. Shah. Oh well, about that, I got another last-minute order. It seems like yesterday was my lucky day. It was an urgent order, so I rushed to do both. The other one is also just finished, smiling. Allies. So you just finished work? Shah. Yes, why? Confused. Bell. You haven't slept at all since yesterday, worried. Shah, don't worry, I have a lot of energy so I'll be fine. Anyway, I don't care about my condition, I care about my armor. Don't waste time with it, go and try it out. Tomorrow if you want you can come and give me your opinion about it, crossing her arms. Bell. Okay, but make sure you rest, saying goodbye. Allies. You heard me, you can't disobey Belmridge's request, so make sure her concern isn't in vain, leaving. Shah. Belmridge. Confused. Shah shrugged and was about to turn around and walk into her smithy until she heard the sounds of someone approaching. Shah. Turning around, oh, I see you're a miss. You're also coming early for your order. Looking at her. Shah looked calmly at a blonde-haired blue-eyed elf with a large green cloak and a wooden sword at her waist, Ryuu Lion. Ryuu. I need to have the weapon as soon as possible for safety. Does it have the measurements I asked for? Raising an eyebrow. Shah. Of course Miss Lion, they have exactly the measurements you requested, although I find it curious, those specifications fit quite well with the size of my other client, laughing, but that doesn't matter now, entering the blacksmith shop. Ryuu stood outside the blacksmith shop calmly as she waited until Shah came out for the second time, but now with a sword in his hand. It was a double-edged sword, with a thin silver-colored blade, the hilt completely black, with the lower part crooked marking the end. Shah extended the sword to him, watching Ryuu grip it tightly along with its black sheath, coldly inspecting the weapon, making Shah sweat. After a few seconds of inspection for Ryuu and an eternity for Shah, Ryuu finally nodded pleased. Ryuu. It's a good job, I recognize it, looking at him. Ryuu extended a bag of Valis to a relieved Shah who accepted it with a calmer smile. Shah. It is a pleasure to be able to create quality work for a member of the Astraea family. If you require my service as a blacksmith, do not hesitate to come. I assure you I will forge only quality materials. Proud. Ryuu. I'll keep that in mind, Shah-san, turning around. Ryuu left the place under the gaze of Shah, who entered his forge and took a pillow and a blanket. Shah. I think I'm starting to guess who that sword is for, closing his eyes. Astraea family headquarters. In the Astraea family mansion, Aiz and Bell were in a small circular garden surrounded by walls of bushes and full of beautiful flowers of different colors that simulated stars. Right in the center there was an area without flowers made of stone bricks where you could walk. Bell was kneeling in front of the circle of flowers that surrounded them, touching the flowers gently. Aiz, do you like the place? Smiling, it has some of the rarest and most exotic flowers in the world. It's like Astraea-sama's garden. Bell. I love it, smiling, it's a very peaceful and quiet place. Standing up, but what are we doing here? Curious. Aiz. I told you we were going to train, smiling. Bell raised an eyebrow in confusion as he watched Aiz smile with an aura of happiness around her. Bell. But we are in Kami-sama's garden, confused. Aiz. Exactly. Laughing. L.A. Aiz. Let's train here, smiling. Bell. But we're going to damage Kami-sama's flowers, nervous. Aiz. Not if we stay on the stone floor. Bell looked at Aiz nervously as she said that as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Bell. But we can accidentally fall on them, why train here? Looking at her. Aiz. Motivation. Encouraged. Bell. Motivation. Aiz. That's right, the stone floor is small, so you're going to have to learn to fight quickly if you don't want to trip or fall on the flowers. If you do, Astraea-sama will get very angry and will punish us both, smiling, the safety of both depends on you. Smiling innocently. Bell. No pressure. Aiz. Don't worry, it won't be that hard the first few times, smiling, you can always train on your own somewhere else, but this training with me is a must. Ella. Aiz take. Bell looked up and saw Aiz extend a sword to him as she unsheathed her own. Aiz. You need to be motivated, so we'll use real swords and train here from now on, smiling. Bell gulped nervously and raised his sword protectively in front of him as he noticed Aiz getting into an attacking stance. Aiz. Here I go. Jumping. It was already late. And in Astraea's flower garden was Bell, bruised and with some small cuts on his body, lying on the ground with the sword lying several meters away from him. Aiz calmly sheathed her sword and turned to look at Bell gently. Aiz. I overdid it walking towards him, even though I held back. I think it was too much for him, he barely got his Falna, carrying Bell. Aiz took Bell in her arms and walked towards the mansion to heal him. Once inside the mansion, she went to the living room and laid him down on one of the armchairs before going for a first aid kit and treating his wounds. There weren't many, he didn't overdo it either, and tried to give him more hand-to-hand attacks than with the sword. He had 5 small cuts, one on his cheek, another on his hand, 2 on his body and the last one on his right arm. Aiz. Lion will get angry when he sees this, laughing nervously. See what? Aiz was excited when she heard Ryuu's voice behind her and quickly turned around to see the aforementioned looking at her with her arms crossed. Aiz. Nothing. Excited. Looking closely at Ryuu, she realized that she had a vein marked on her face while she smiled forcedly. She was angry, well it was obvious, she could completely see Bell lying on the couch with wounds and bruises and some bandages that Aiz was just putting on him. In fact, he was still holding the bandages on his right hand, so he didn't really have to think much to know what had happened. Ryuu. You fought him without even teaching him how to use a sword. Annoyed. Aiz. In my defense, if you had trained him you would have held back less than me, so even if he was more trained with the sword, he would have ended up the same or worse. As Aiz spoke, her tone of voice slowly lowered as she saw the annoyed look Ryuu was giving her. Aiz. I was just saying. Ryuu sighed slightly and approached Bell a little, checking his condition. Ryuu. Well, it's true, looking at him softly. Alice. Well, at least you calmed down, nervous. Ryuu. What do you mean? Confused. Alice. Well. Before Alice could say anything else, Ryuu could hear a scream of horror coming from the Astraea flower field. Ryuu. Astraea-sama. Exalted. Ryuu was about to run to the garden worried about her goddess until Alice took her arm, stopping her. Ryuu. What are you doing, Aiz? Astraea-sama could be in danger. Exalted. Aiz. I'm sure she's fine, and I don't think it's a good idea to go see her now, looking away. Ryuu. Why? Confused. Aiz. Well, maybe to motivate Bell more. I trained him in the Astraea-sama flower garden and he fell a couple of times on the flowers, playing with her fingers nervously. Ryuu. Looking at her silently. Astraea garden. In Astraea's garden was the aforementioned kneeling in front of the sunken and destroyed flowers, in which the shape of some footprints and that of a small body were marked. Bell's room. In a simple room with white walls and a simple bed with white sheets, Bell was lying on it while resting from his hard training with allies. The lights were off and only a little light from the moon came in through the window. After a few seconds he showed signs of waking up. It was late when Bell fell asleep after allies' training, so it was normal for him to wake up in the middle of the night. Bell? Confused. Bell got out of bed slightly sleepy, so much so that he even thought he was in the cabin where he used to live with his grandfather and walked towards the door of his room to go out for something to eat since he was hungry. It didn't seem strange to him to see everything in the dark and at the same time because everything was dark, he didn't realize that it wasn't his grandfather's cabin. He closed the door carefully and turned around to go to the kitchen, only to see a few meters to his left side an elven girl with green hair and glasses looking at him in surprise. Bell? Looking at her. Nervous. Bell looked at the elven girl without much importance. She had short light green hair and bright green eyes, thanks to her large rimless glasses with a metal frame. She was young, probably just 1 or 2 years older than him. Her pointy ears twitched slightly as she saw Bell approaching, and she moved considerably away from him, hoping he wouldn't come any closer. Bell just walked past her and greeted her politely while yawning. The girl, seeing him pass by, took courage to confront him and stood in front of him, blocking his way. Who are you? Nervous. Bell turned around, slightly exalting her, and stared at her without blinking, making her sweat from nerves. Bell. I'm Bell, nice to meet you, El-san, smiling. Even asleep, Bell smiled peacefully as he always did. It was a pure and honest smile that somehow immediately relaxed the excited elf who finally stopped trembling as she no longer saw him as a threat. And nice to meet you, looking at him, what are you doing here? Looking at him cautiously. Bell. I live here, smiling kindly. As if he believed he had answered all his questions, Bell turned around and continued his way to the kitchen, being seen by the elf who nervously extended her hand. Wait. Following him. Bell walked towards the kitchen being followed by the elf who kept a little distance from him while walking nervously. Why, you can't live here, this is the headquarters of the Astraea family, not a single man has entered here, following him. The elf looked at Bell waiting for an answer but became excited when she saw him with a small glass of freshly poured milk in his hand while taking small sips with incredible calm. Hey. Looking at him. Suddenly the elf froze when Bell's hand gently rested on her forehead as he looked at her in confusion. Bell. Are you sick? And no, surprised. Bell. Really? You stutter a lot, although it's cute, smiling. The elf's face reddened up to her ears before she quickly moved away from him, hiding behind one of the armchairs in the living room, next to the kitchen. Bell also walked to the living room and sat on another of the armchairs while calmly drinking some milk. On the other side of the room was the elf hiding behind one of the armchairs holding her forehead with a blush on her cheeks. He gently rubbed his forehead and then looked at his hand in confusion before slowly getting up, seeing Bell sitting in one of the armchairs while drinking milk very calmly. Why you touched me, looking at her. Bell. Looking at her, does it bother you? Sorry. Then no, I'm not bothered, surprised. Bell. Oh, you turned red again, smiling. Sanrahada. Bell. What's your name, Elf-san? Looking at her. Selty. I'm Selty Srowa, looking at him shyly. Bell. What a nice name, smiling. Selty blushing. Wait, you said your name is Bell, right? Looking at him. Bell hi, smiling. Selty. So you're the new member Kagaya-san talked about, whispering, but I thought you were a girl, isn't Bell a bit of a feminine name? Looking at him. Bell. Maybe, but it's a pretty name, isn't it? Smiling. Selty. Why yes, it's cute, looking at it. Selty continued looking at Bell in surprise. She wasn't there when the other members welcomed him to the family, so she only knew about him from a few words from the family's sub-captain, and because of his name, she really believed all this time that it was another girl. When they told her that she was more or less her age, she was excited to think that she would have someone her own age to share some things with. She never thought that he would actually be a boy, one so kind and calm that he could touch her as if she were the simplest thing in the world, her, an elf, and for some strange reason, that it didn't bother her. She was shy and nervous, but still had some elven customs well forged inside her. That's why a guy touched her forehead so liberally and she didn't mind. It was peculiar, not to say strange. But leaving that aside, I look at Bell still in surprise. How had he been accepted into the Astraea family? As far as she knew, no man would have managed to join in all the time the family had been formed. Selty came out of her thoughts when she heard the sound of a glass being placed on the table and turned to look at Bell, who had left his empty glass on the table, getting up and returning to his room with complete calm. Bell. See you tomorrow Celti, smiling kindly. Celti. Huh. Surprised, wait, can't you call me so friendly without honorifics, Bell-san. Bell-san. Watching him leave. Bell. Why not? You can call me Bell without honorifics if you want, smiling. Celti. You're a very shameless boy. Blushing. Bell. Yeah. You're just so pretty, looking at her. Celti remained silent, clenching her fists as smoke came out of her head. In the end, all she did was blush and look at Bell as she went to her room. Celti. Bell, embarrassed. Meanwhile Bell was already deep into his room. At no time had Bell lost sleep, in fact perhaps that glass of milk made him sleep more and he never woke up completely, so he didn't see anything strange while he thought he was in his grandfather's cabin. Simple innocence. Already in his room and eager to sleep, he went to his soft and warm bed to lie down. He covered himself with the sheets and closed his eyes to sleep. Tomorrow would be a new and exciting day for the Bell's room. In the room of the strange humanoid rabbit was the aforementioned sleeping peacefully in his bed before the rays of the sun passed through his window until they reached his face. Bell slowly opened his eyes and turned around to avoid the sun's rays on his face. But I was already awake. He sat on the edge of his bed as he gently rubbed his eyes before opening them. Fully awake, he had rested quite well, and thanks to the fact that he used to live in a cabin with his grandfather, he also had the habit of waking up early. He got out of bed and went to clean up in a small bathroom in the room he had there. Already clean, he put on his armor with a smile on his face and left his room to go to the living room. However, before going to the living room, he stood still, watching a green-haired elf girl with glasses just coming out of the next room. She looked very thoughtful, but from one moment to the next she raised her determined gaze and suddenly turned in his direction. But it seems that she had not noticed his presence because as soon as she saw him she lost all trace of determination in her eyes and changed her look to a shy and nervous one. Still, it seemed like she wanted to say something and she took a deep breath before looking him in the eyes with less nervousness than before, although it was still noticeable that she was just trying to hide her embarrassment. Bell decided to remain silent as he looked at her, she seemed familiar to him. Suddenly a memory from last night came to mind. A memory of that same elf with light green hair and strong green eyes wearing glasses speaking to her in embarrassment. Just as Celti was about to say something, Bell beat her to the punch. Bell. Oh, are you Celti-san? Right, sorry, I didn't recognize you from last night at first. I was a little sleepy yesterday, laughing embarrassed. Celti. Huh. Looking at him. Celti remained silent for a while, staring at him. Bell looked at her confused, he felt judged out of nowhere and it was easy to know it was by Celti. Bell. Celti-san. Looking at her. Celti. Bell. Blushing. Bell. Huh. Yeah. Confused. Celti looked at him in surprise, still with her cheeks flushed, before clenching her fists and looking at him with a frown and full of shame. Celti. I told you Bell so I want you to call me just by my name, blushing. Bell. Celti. Tilts head. Oh, Aiz niece said she wanted to talk to me this morning, sorry Celti, I have to hurry, running, see you later, smiling. Celti stood silently watching him leave before letting out a huge sigh of relief and smiling slightly. Celti. I said a name, smiling happily. Oh. Celti became excited when she heard a female voice near her and turned her gaze to the hallway, seeing the door of another of the rooms open, where she could see a beautiful girl with long black hair looking at her with amusement. Celti K Kagaya-sama, embarrassed. Kagaya. Wow Celti I didn't think you would be such a shameless elf Yufu, laughing amusedly. Celti. It's not that. Blushing. In the training ground Bell was looking at the withered flowers he had silently crushed in his previous training with allies. Bell. I'm sorry, looking at the flowers. I see you arrived early. Bell turned his gaze watching allies enter the field of flowers with her typical cheerful smile as always. Allies. Very well, it's good to see that you didn't avoid training, smiling. Unfortunately training doesn't save me from my responsibilities as captain, so our training won't last as long as the last one, looking at him. You can follow my advice and train your movements on your own, you can ask the vice captain for advice, she's a black-haired girl with a dark red kimono, her name is Gajano Kagaya, smiling. Bell. I understand, thanks, smiling. Bell got up from the ground under the gaze of allies who approached until she was in front of him. Allies. Before we start, one of your Wiene-chan has something for you. Allies stepped aside, letting her see Ryuu, who also walked towards the flower field calmly with a long object wrapped in his hands. Bell. Ryuu-san. Looking at her. Ryuu. Hi Bell, I'm sorry I didn't arrive earlier yesterday, if I had I could have given you this earlier. Ryuu stopped in front of Bell and removed the sheets from the object, allowing Bell to see a black-handled sword sheathed in a black sheath with silver details. Bell took the sword with curiosity and unsheathed it, seeing his face reflected in the beautiful silver edge of the sword. Bell. Looks great, smiling. Ryuu. I'm glad, it's custom made, its blade is thin, but it's strong and sharp, I've been able to verify it for myself, smiling slightly. Bell. Thank you very much Ryuu-san, smiling. Ryuu nodded and turned to look at Allies, who was also smiling happily. Ryuu. Allies, remember that we have an important patrol to do in 2 hours at the request of the Loki family, don't waste your time here, leaving. Allies. Yes, with drooping shoulders, well, then let's take advantage of this time for your training. Bell, smiling. Bell ha. 5. Bell let out a groan as his small body fell to the ground for the 15th time after Allies surprised him with a double blow to the chest. 2 hours. 2 hours of clumsy, sloppy attacks, imitating Alice's movements as best he could, but not being of her level. Her movements were those of a novice, careless and clumsy, although Alice held back a lot she was not able to land any blow, on the contrary, for each blow she tried to land she received 3. After the third fall to the ground, he realized that trying to connect a blow would be useless. So he found a more viable alternative. Improve. Instead of focusing in vain on winning, he focused on improving during the fight. He knew that he wouldn't be able to connect any blows, and that it would be useless to try if the result would be the same, so he focused on improving his movements during the fight. He practiced his cuts and movements while fighting Allies. He couldn't avoid her blows or being knocked down, but he could improve his technique by watching her and imitating her until his attacks approached her level. It wasn't even close. But it was a beginning for the. Yes, I was going to ask the vice captain for advice. Bell sat on the floor rubbing his head and looking up, seeing Allies in front of him without sweating in the slightest. Allies. Very well, you improved your movements a little, I'm flattered that you imitate me, but your sword is not big enough to use my style, both are thin, but it won't work for you, not to mention your completion, look for a style that is comfortable for your size and sword, Kagaya will help you with that, smiling, what time is it? Seeing the sun, damn it's been 2.5 hours. Exalted, sorry little one I have to go quickly. Allies ran past Bell who watched her leave at the speed of light, worried about her safety, and how could he not worry, Ryuu had already warned him about arriving early and she was already half an hour late. Bell got up from the floor and shook some of the dust off his clothes, looking at his body. He had no wounds, his armor was next to the garden entrance, Allies said that it was better to keep it ready and prepared for when he fought with Evilas, and that it was not convenient to use it in training. Yes, I would have preferred to ignore him, perhaps it would have reduced the impact of some blows to his body. Bell looked down and sheathed his sword with difficulty, he was still not used to sheathing and unsheathing. It was still something new for him that he had to get used to, and he had to learn to do it quickly, he didn't want to accidentally cut himself in the middle of combat just by sheathing and unsheathing. Bell. Where is the family's vice captain? Curious. Now? What do you need from me, little one? Bell was slightly excited upon hearing a soft voice behind him, and turning around, he could see a beautiful girl with straight black hair and a hair ornament on the left side of her head with a red flower. She was wearing a wine-colored kimono and a sheathed katana on the left side of her hip, held by a yellow and pink sash at her waist. Her eyes were also a faint reddish color, and around them she had a thin red eyeliner. The woman had a funny smile on her face, he could tell just by looking at her face that the woman had a teasing and seductive personality. Bell. Are you Kagaya-san? Looking at her. Kagaya. The same, smiling, now. What a mess you and Allies made here, huh? Looking at the flowers, at this rate, all the flowers will die in a couple of weeks. LLO being, bowing. Kagaya. It's not me you should apologize to, besides it'll be fine, you can apologize by planting flowers here too, smiling. Bell in serio. Kagaya. Of course, Astraea likes this place because these are flowers that the family members planted once, each one put a different flower that they liked, sooner or later this place will be without a flower, so you can plant flowers yourself to return its beauty to this place, looking at the flowers. Bell. Hey. What kind of flowers did the others plant? Looking at her. Kagaya. That doesn't matter, plant the flowers you want or the ones you like the most, don't plant flowers for others, those are meaningless flowers, plant the ones you like, that's what makes this place beautiful, besides I doubt you can get some of the flowers that were here. The guy looked at a pink flower with a soft green stem without thorns, it was a beautiful flower, but now it was crushed against the ground, along with several others around it. The memory of the time she was accepted into the family came to her mind, the time she planted that flower in this field as a thank you to Astraea, it was a strange flower, one she had brought from her home in the Far East, a rare flower even in her home. Kagaya smiled slightly seeing the withered flower, still finding beauty in it before turning around seeing Bell had me in her thoughts, it seems that she had taken his words seriously. Bell. Okay, I'll plant a flower that I like, smiling. Kagaya. Very well, smiling, now tell me, what do you need help with? Bell. Ah, about that, looking at his sword, Alicent told me to ask for your help to find a suitable technique for me, showing his sword, and besides that, slowly sheathing the sword, I would like you to help me improve when sheathing and unsheathing. Kagaya. I understand, yes, your sheathing and unsheathing is horrendous, being a thin and double-edged sword it is not easy to sheath, looking at her, okay, we will practice here, although we will be more careful, looking at the flowers. Bell. Sorry. Kagaya. Don't worry, it's just a matter of improving, smiling, very well, let's start with the lesson, smiling. Bell. Hi. The training was easy, compared to allies it was much simpler, although more tiring, I didn't have to rest, with allies at least I could rest while lying down. Kagaya wouldn't let him stop until he finished training or he hurt his hands or accidentally cut himself. They were basic trainings for beginners, like raising the sword above your head and bringing it down forcefully in front of you, but without letting it go below your stomach, you had to use force to stop the sword right in that position. It was an advantage that the sword was not so heavy, something that Kagaya noticed. And not wanting the training to be so easy, she gave him a training sword that she used, it was an oak sword, simple, shaped like a katana, also large and heavy. Much more difficult to handle than his thin sword that he could almost call a rapier. He dropped the wooden sword several times because he felt his hands were burning, he didn't have enough grip strength to properly stop the sword, and after a while, he could see his hands were red and bruised. It was nothing serious, nothing that a rest won't easily take away, but Kagaya wouldn't let it go that easily. For this was what those exercises were, to improve the grip and firmness when holding the weapon. But those were not the only exercises. At this moment Belle was sitting on the stone floor resting. Kagaya had left recently because she had matters to take care of and allowed him to rest. For Belle it was a relief to finally have a break, although he was deeply grateful that Kagaya's training did not damage the flowers due to her lack of skill. Belle sighed slightly in relief and looked at his hands with slight pain, his palms bruised, reddened and sore, and on the back of his palms, he had some bandages slightly stained with blood, they were cuts he had made himself by not sheathing his sword properly. Kagaya understood that he should sheathe the sword slowly since he was a novice, but she did not let him look at the sword when sheathing it, and many times that caused him to prick himself with the tip of the blade in his hand. That was another exercise. Sheath and unsheath. Kagaya was able to sheath and unsheath her sword with great speed and precision without hesitation. It wasn't that difficult to draw, but one wrong move and the sword could slip from his hand or even be thrown out with more force than he used. That was something Kagaya explained to him, when you unsheath a sword if you push it up or down while unsheathing it, you will charge an attack, and with enough firmness, you will be able to make a clean cut on any surface or object, that was a sword technique. The quick draw that enhanced the first sword attack, but the sheathing also had to be done quickly, this way you could perform the movement again. It was a simple technique in Kagaya's words that anyone could do and learn, it improved as you practiced it, if you practiced enough you could be able to cut any metal, although not everyone could reach that level, especially because the technique only worked when you unsheathed, so it was preferable to practice your combat style more. Although Belle was very interested in boosting an attack and becoming capable of cutting everything. It might be an exaggeration, but Belle was fascinated by Kagaya's words. Being able to cut through even the hardest metal with a single attack. At the same time you could also draw and defend against a heavy attack, and with the strength accumulated in the cabin, you could give it more power to receive a heavier attack without suffering damage to yourself or your weapon. Kagaya said it was called Iaido, a technique from the Far East that every samurai used. Technique that amazed Belle. He practiced it for a long time under Kagaya's supervision, but obviously he didn't improve in a couple of hours. Even though Kagaya and allies had said that improvements are obtained with effort and time, I knew that I wouldn't improve overnight, but I waited patiently for the day when I could reach the level of both of them. Elle got up from the ground with some difficulty and walked inside the mansion to rest a bit before continuing to practice. And 5. The Emotionless Swordswoman. Streets of Riveria. In the streets of Riveria, a certain white-haired man with red eyes could be found walking calmly through the area with interest. I had thought about Alice's advice about training alone when she wasn't training him, since his training times would be shorter due to her responsibilities as captain. So I was looking for a good place where I could train without being easily visible to evil and being a target. He also thought about Kagaya's advice about flowers. He wanted to look for a flower shop or a place where he could buy some to plant them again in Astraea's garden. There were already a few withered and discarded flowers because of him, and although he thought it would be better to fill the field again with colorful flowers like it was before, Kagaya's advice seemed wise to him. So even if it was boring or simple I would fill in the gaps he left with flowers that he would like. I was thinking about the lilies. The flower with long white petals that he liked quite a lot. He didn't know why, but its white color filled him with peace when he saw it. So that was reason enough to choose that flower. The problem was where to get it. There weren't many flower shops available in this era, or shops in general. Nor places where I could train comfortably without disturbing anyone or being seen by evilers. So it wouldn't be a simple search, but he would try hard. Bell looked up seeing the sun coming straight through without any cloud or disturbance. It was a beautiful day, considering that in this season of love it was usually almost always cloudy or raining. So seeing a sunny day was strange although beautiful. Bell smiled happily as he felt the sun touch his skin and give him warmth, it was comforting, and he wasn't the only one who thought so. In various parts of the day, several people, regardless of race, left their homes, still afraid of being attacked, but they left just to receive a little of the sunlight that was not common to see. It was comforting for everyone. However, it was also a great sign for Bell, who looked up seeing the walls of Astraea in the distance. Bell. I can go see the walls, seeing them, walking. And with an idea in mind of where he could train he headed towards the walls of Astraea with a smile on his face. Astraea walls. Right on the stone path that was on the walls Bell was walking calmly along the paths made to watch from inside and outside in case of a war against some nation. It was a peaceful place with no people around, it was completely empty and there was no noise in the place. That and the sunlight made it a very good place to train, plus the hallways were wide enough to train without obstacles. And it was away from any crowded areas, so it was perfect to go unnoticed by evilers. It was perfect. Bell smiled pleased at his good luck in finding the perfect place to train and unsheathed his sword, raising it in front of him to repeat the movements that Kagaya had taught him. According to her, she just had to repeat the movements until she perfected them, so it wasn't a complicated workout, just tiring. Just at that moment when Bell was about to resume his training a peculiar voice called him. Who are you? Bell stopped suddenly, feeling a slight chill run down his spine as he heard a feminine, childish voice devoid of emotion behind him. He lowered his sword gently and turned around, surprised to see a girl about his age with golden hair and eyes. He brought with him a light and peculiar adventurer armor, the breastplate was somewhat thin, but served as a vest that in turn held metal plates that reached below the waist, but were only on his sides. Black striped clothing with a blue ring on the neck and long blue gloves that reached above the elbow and black fingers, with a metal elbow protector and slightly wide wrist protectors, long blue tights and boots with a slight metal heel. On his back, he carried a sheathed sword of the same colors as his clothing, white, black and blue, a little wide per small according to its size, even so it was seen that it was 6 times the thickness of his, and was probably heavier and of higher quality. Well, all of that was amazing, plus her beautiful hair and eyes that seemed to shine beautifully in the sunlight. What caught all his attention was her expression. The cold and serene look, devoid of any emotion, I could barely see a trace of curiosity about him. His face also reflected nothing, he did not move, there was no emotion, only a deep and penetrating look that seemed like an abyss. Although that was something that would make many uncomfortable, it was not something that really disturbed Bell who only smiled embarrassedly while putting away his sword. Bell. I'm Bell Cranel, what's your name? Looking at her. Aiz Waldstein, looking at him. Bell. Nice to meet you Aiz-san, I like your eyes, they are pretty, smiling. Aiz tilted her head looking at Bell with curiosity, who kept his pure smile on his face watching her. Aiz. You're weird, staring at him. Bell. Is that what you think? Scratching his neck, what are you doing here? Looking at her. Aiz. I followed you, looking at him. Bell. Huh. Curious, why? Aiz. You reminded me of someone, looking at him closely, are you an adventurer? Seeing his armor and weapon. Bell. Recently, you're one too, aren't you? Aiz. Yes, I'm level 2, looking at him. Bell's eyes lit up upon hearing his words, confusing Aiz. Bell. Amazing, I'm only a level 1, but someday I want to be as strong as a first class, smiling. Aiz's eyes filled with curiosity and she got a little closer to Bell, now standing at a close distance. Aiz. I will also become that strong, seriously. Bell. I know, smiling. Aiz blinked in puzzlement and looked at Bell for a couple of seconds, stunned by Bell's personality. As she talked to him, she realized how peculiar he was. Bell. Could you train me? Looking at her. Aiz. What? Surprised. Bell. Yes, it's just that I recently got my Falna and I'm not really that strong, so I'd like you to train me to level 2, smiling. Aiz. I don't think I know how to teach you, I can't contain myself, and I don't know how to train, looking at him. Bell. It doesn't matter, just fighting me is enough, it would help me improve and get closer to my goal, smiling. Aiz raised her eyebrow curiously and looked at him closely. Aiz. What's your goal? Looking at him. Bell. I want to be a hero. Smiling proudly. Aiz opened her eyes in surprise and silently watched Bell smile from ear to ear as he said that. Suddenly a very deep memory awakened in Aiz. Is Dad my hero too? No, darling, he's my hero, but I'm sure that one day a hero will appear for you who will love you as much as Dad loves me, your own hero. Aiz blinked out of her thought seeing Bell and suddenly came closer extending her hand towards him. Bell opened his eyes in surprise when he felt a hand gently touch his cheek and opened his eyes seeing Aiz in front of him looking at him with a sparkle in her eyes. For a moment he even saw a face full of hope in her. Aiz. I want to train you, looking at him, let's train, here, every day. Bell. Every day. Sweating. Aiz. Every day. Determined. Bell. Okay, thanks, smiling. Aiz regained her composure and moved slightly away from Bell before quickly drawing her sword, holding it with both hands and getting into an attack position. Bell didn't have to think long to realize what that meant and gripped the hilt of his sword to put himself on guard. However, before he could draw his sword, Aiz had already launched herself at him to attack, surprising him. As quickly as he could, he drew his sword just as Kagaya taught him and used it to enhance the first cut he was going to make when he unsheathed his weapon. The cut came out a little faster than any other attack I had made, but the difference was minimal. And now, being a few steps away from him, he saw the sword calmly passing close to his face. It seemed that the blow was going to hit him, but at a much greater speed his sword hit Bell's from below and deflected it, making it bounce in the opposite direction to the one it was going to, surprising Bell. Bell was left completely unprotected and could only see Aiz spinning around before kicking him in the face. 5. Bell fell to the ground in pain and rubbed his nose feeling like it might be broken. But that didn't stop him, and even though it hurt he got up quickly and took his sword again with both hands placing it in front of him while he saw Aiz waiting for another attack, but Aiz stopped him. Aiz. You stopped, looking at him. L.A. Aiz. That attack was faster at first, but you encouraged it yourself, why? Looking at him. Bell. I felt like I might have cut you and I got worried, looking at her. Aiz. I see, thoughtful, attack with everything you have, that attack was fast, but it wasn't going to hit me, I could have easily blocked it too, seeing it. Bell. Ah I see, yes, I think I overestimated myself thinking I could hurt a level 2, laughing embarrassed. Aiz nodded and got into an attacking stance, launching herself at Bell almost immediately. Slash. And the soft breeze of the wind appeared on the wall. Gently rocking the smooth golden hair that belonged to a beautiful girl with golden eyes. Aiz observed the clear blue sky with great calm. It was the first time in a while that he had seen the sky so calm and clear and also the first time that he had stopped to look at it in detail. It wasn't something she would do. But now she didn't have much to do, if she moved she might wake him up and she didn't want to interrupt his sleep. Aiz looked down at her lap, where the head of the white-haired boy she had been training a few minutes ago was gently resting before fainting with a strong kick to the chin. Aiz looked at Bell's white hair carefully before directing her hands towards it and beginning to caress it. For the 8th time in those minutes that she had put it on her lap, she thought again that it was a rabbit with those eyes like ruby and that white hair. I don't need to imagine much to compare it with an Almira with which she had fought once in the past, but it was not an insult, at least she did not feel that it was an insult, she saw it as cute. Then he looked up at the sky again, seeing a solitary cloud passing peacefully by. Suddenly Aiz opened his eyes as he thought about how long he had been there. She was supposed to go to the dungeon like always after escaping again from her family's headquarters. She was going to spend about 9 hours in the dungeon and would return until the night bruised and wounded after spending all that time fighting with monsters on the 15th and 16th floors. But here it was. On top of the wall around the aerario giving a lap pillow to a cute rabbit-like boy who had agreed to train every day. Aiz looked into nothingness thoughtfully. That was a problem because if her training continued as it did today, she wouldn't be able to go to the dungeon as usual and kill monsters. So this took away precious time from training alone. Aiz looked at Bell thoughtfully, yes, it was a distraction from her training. Well, what did it matter? Aiz continued to gently stroke his soft white hair as she put those thoughts aside. A promise was a promise, so unfortunately for her now she was going to have to train Bell every day. If his training ever ended early, he would go to the dungeon, but she had to train him because now he was her responsibility and Riveria had told her that she should be more responsible. He had told her that many times and today he would make her feel proud because for the first time he would listen to him. I definitely had to be proud of her, in fact, she deserved a Jag Americans award for being so responsible at that moment. Before Aiz could continue to act on her mind, she was brought out of her thoughts when she heard a soft moan from Bell as a sign that he was waking up and she looked down at him, watching him intently. Bell opened his eyes slightly seeing a bright gold ride in front of him. At first he was confused, but soon he noticed Aiz's face and his golden eyes staring at him when he woke up. Aiz. Hello, looking at him. Bell. Aiz-san. Surprised, how long did I sleep? Aiz. Not enough, pouting slightly. L.A. Aiz. About 15 minutes, returning to normal face. L. I understand, are you giving me a lap pillow? Looking at her. A.C. L. Why? Blushing slightly. Aiz. I thought you'd be more comfortable this way, don't you like it? L. It's not that, it's actually very comfortable, I was just surprised, embarrassed. Aiz. If you feel comfortable, let's do it always, looking at him, and tell me Aiz, everyone does it. L. I understand, it's okay Aiz, looking at her. Aiz nodded with a small pleased smile on her face. Aiz. Do you want to keep training? Looking at him. L. Yes, I would like it please, standing up slowly. Aiz remained in the same position as before for a couple of seconds, before looking at her empty lap in silence. Aiz. It feels cold, getting up slowly. Aiz got up from the ground and walked towards Bell, who had already taken his predestined place to fight waiting for Aiz. Just as they were about to start fighting again, Aiz suddenly stopped him. Aiz. Wait, raising a hand. L. Huh. Stopping abruptly, yeah. Aiz. Sheath your sword, looking at him. L. Why? Confused. Aiz. The first fight we had, your first attack was faster when unsheathed, do that again, it's a good attack, looking at it. L. Oh righty Ado, looking at his sword. L carefully sheathed his sword and gripped the hilt tightly, ready to unsheath it at the right moment, before turning to look at Aiz seriously, preparing to attack her. They had had 27 confrontations so far, and one collapse, and with all that it had become clear to him that Aiz was completely out of his league. The difference of one level was very noticeable to him, he was able to know it after fighting against her, if she wanted she could easily kill him with a sword. So he didn't have to hold back, because no matter how hard he tried he had no chance to do any damage, so he went back to the same technique he did with allies, learning. I tried to imitate Aiz's movements, it was difficult, her style was more aggressive and direct than Alice's, she had almost no defense, only movements to deflect or cut, her blows were heavy and aggressive, although I also noticed that she was holding back. It was amazing. However, he peculiarly liked his style, it was easier for him to understand. There were things that didn't work, like those direct and aggressive attacks, but leaving that aside, he liked Aiz's style, maybe he could use it as a base for his own style. Bell was brought out of his thoughts when he heard the sound of stone crunching, and the blood quickly drained from his face. In all his training with Aiz that had only happened once, and it was the time he knocked him out with that powerful kick, his jaw still hurt. Bell opened his eyes in shock, seeing Aiz shoot out at a much greater speed than before towards him, closing the distance in a matter of seconds. Bell could barely react, drawing his sword with the greatest speed and strength he had. It was not in vain. Since Aiz had to stop his aggressive attack to duck and prevent the cut from slicing his neck, he still didn't blink or hesitate at any time. He simply dodged and released the sword with his left hand, leaving it free and closing it into a fist. Being at a nearly zero distance from Bell, being almost glued to each other, so much so that Bell could feel Aiz's breathing, dodging was no longer something within his capabilities. Punch. And everything went black again. Bell opened his eyes again tiredly after a short nap on Aiz's lap. It was the fourth time she had knocked him out that day, each time she seemed more eager to knock him out, and I didn't understand why. Anyway, I should stop for today. Not only was it his personal opinion, Aiz also agreed after seeing his cheek red and swollen after so many heavy hits. He didn't want to admit it, but he felt a little relieved after finishing training. For his sake, he was sure that one or two more blows, and he was going to lose his teeth. I'm fine, smiling embarrassed. Aiz. Sorry, I got carried away, slightly embarrassed. Aiz was gently rubbing Bell's cheek with her right hand after seeing how she had left him. The progressive Bell was bruised, beaten, and had a few bruises and cuts after receiving his aggressive attacks. Maybe from now on I should start training him using his sheath as a sword instead of his own sword. Yes, it would be a good idea. Bell. Don't worry, in time I'll fight alongside you at the same level, I promise, smiling. Aiz looked at him silently for a few seconds before continuing to rub his cheek gently without saying anything. Bell. Thank you very much for agreeing to train me Aiz, I'm sorry if it's a bother to you, embarrassed. Aiz. It's no bother, sometimes I have things to do, but I agreed to train you, and now it's my responsibility, so I'll take care of you, proud. Bell. I understand, thanks, smiling, although I was too busy training, I was also supposed to go for something today, laughing nervously. Aiz. What thing? Curious. Bell. I wanted to find a flower shop that sold white lilies or some seeds to plant, but I didn't find anything in the morning, and all afternoon I was here training. Aiz looked at Bell thoughtfully before staring at him, getting his attention. Aiz. I know where to find, approaching. Bell was about to answer, but before doing so he opened his eyes in slight surprise when he saw Aiz take his hand and gently pull him towards the stairs of the wall. Aiz. Follow me, leading him by the hand. Bell. Why yes. Twilight Mansion. Twilight Mansion. The home and headquarters of one of the strongest current families in Arario. The Loki family. Many also called them the giant killing family due to their record as the family that has killed the most floor bosses on their excursions. It was a castle with an irregular shape, quite large and imposing. The entrance was a huge dark wooden door carved in Nordic details, in which I could see two jesters carved in the wood. Door in front of which Bell and Aiz were now standing, looking at the door. Bell looked at the mansion in surprise, obviously he knew which family they belonged to, on his map when he had arrived at Arario it was noted, and he knew that it was one of the strongest families currently having 3 quite strong level 6s. Bell. What are we doing at the Loki family headquarters? Surprised. Aiz. It's my family, expressionless. Bell opened his mouth in surprise, but before he could say anything else the door suddenly opened revealing a bearded dwarf wearing a Viking helmet walking out calmly before seeing them. Oh? What are you doing here? I thought you'd be back at 9, bruised and crawling on the floor. Looking at her. Aiz. Gareth, looking at him, that was the plan, but I ran into a cute kid, looking at Bell. Bell? Huh? Pointing to himself. Aiz. Yes, nods, his name is Bell, I promised to train him from now on, but his family asked him to get some material, and I have it, can I come in? Looking at Gareth. Aiz. Sure, no problem, Riveria is still here, but she's busy, and your companion can't come in, sorry, it's Finn's orders that no one outside the family can come in unless they have his permission, looking at him. Aiz. It's okay, I just had to go for it anyway, looking at him. Gareth. And what family are you from, little one, looking at him. Bell. Ah, I'm Bell Cranel from the Astraea family, nice to meet you, smiling. Gareth opened his eyes in slight surprise before turning to see Aiz, who had already walked through the door and left. Gareth. I see, thoughtful, I'll go talk to Aiz, wait here please, leaving. Bell stood there by the door patiently. Library. In the library of the Twilight Mansion, Aiz was walking through the corridors with wooden shelves full of books, objects or jars with objects inside them. Aiz walked for a while looking around her listening to Gareth walking behind her. Gareth. Aiz, catching up with her, where did you meet the boy? Looking at her. Aiz. Bell, stopping. Gareth. Aiz. His name is Bell, turning to look at him. Gareth. Ah, yes Bell. Aiz nodded and continued walking through the halls until she found something and approached, extending her hands to take it. But there was a problem, it didn't reach the shelf. Gareth watched as Aiz stood on her tiptoes and squinted as she strained to reach the bookshelf. He looked up and saw what he was reaching for, a small, beautifully decorated jar of green glass with silver edges and a silver-covered lid, it looked very expensive and important. Gareth. Can you answer me? Taking the bottle. Aiz lowered her arms when she saw that Gareth took the bottle and looked at it for a few seconds in silence. Aiz. I met him at the wall, I saw him walking down the street and I followed him, looking at him. Gareth looked at her with a bead of sweat on the back of his neck before sighing and asking. Gareth. Why? Looking at him. Aiz. Because he looked cute, expressionless. Gareth. It's the first time I've heard you say that word, but I can't take you seriously if you say it to me with that face. Aiz. Looks like a bunny, looking at him expressionlessly, and strokes his hair. Gareth. What? Aiz. I fainted him so I could stroke his hair, it's very soft, chibi. Gareth. I don't know whether to be worried or surprised. Aiz. It's okay, he said it didn't bother him. Gareth. Why would he say that? Aiz. Because I'm training him, and when he faints, I can stroke his hair, looking at him impatiently, can you give me the bottle? Gareth. I don't know whether to worry about the child or you, giving it to him. Aiz didn't even answer that question, and as soon as he had the bottle in his hands, he left the place leaving Gareth alone who looked into nothing worried. Who's there? Gareth turned his head and saw a tall elf with jade hair and eyes walking towards him curiously. Riveria. Gareth. What are you doing here? Did Finn send you? Looking at him. Gareth. Riveria, looking at her, is Aiz an extremist? Riveria. What? Confused. Gareth. No, it's nothing, it doesn't matter, I'll tell you about it at the next executive meeting, it might be an interesting topic to waste time on, turning around. Riveria nodding confused. Riveria turned her head and calmly searched the shelves before raising an eyebrow in confusion when she saw an empty spot in the object section. Riveria. Did you see a small green bottle with silver details that was here? Looking at it. Gareth. I'm not sure, what did he have? Riveria. I had white lily seeds. They were very expensive seeds that are only found near the Elven nation. They are excellent for making very powerful healing elixirs, so they are very expensive. I only have them because there is a field in my family's castle, and my sister sent them to me before they closed the borders and means of export and import of Riveria. I wanted to use them to create a healing elixir for Wiene. Have you seen them? Looking at him. Bareth. I don't think I've seen it by any chance. How much would that bottle cost? Riveria. Well, considering that each of those seeds in the Elven nation costs 30,000 valis, but outside of there it is harder to get, so it costs about 70,000 each seed. They are not that big, but with just one, you can make an elixir almost at the level of mermaid blood, and that jar was full. It might even cost more than a first-class custom-made weapon. Thoughtful. Bareth. Sweating. Well, if I ever find a bottle with those characteristics I'll let you know. Riveria. Yes, thank you. Leaving. Bareth. I hope Aiz is putting them to good use. Leaving. Twilight Mansion entrance. At the large gates of the Twilight Mansion, Bell stood waiting patiently at the entrance door as she looked around. He had nothing interesting to do there, and besides, he had been told to stay at the entrance. He didn't know the place, and he had no reason to go and look around. Even so, he had to admit that he was tempted to walk through those enormous hallways and explore the entire mansion. He never thought he could be inside a place like this, so he certainly felt like going out there and exploring. In fact, he was about to do it. Fortunately he saw Aiz coming back and didn't do anything stupid. Bell. Hello, smiling. Aiz stood still in front of him, staring at him expressionlessly for a few seconds before answering. Aiz. Hello, showing the bottle, here, extending it. Bell. What is this? Taking it. Aiz. They're white lily seeds. I've seen them there for a long time, so they're not important. You can keep the whole jar if you want, looking at it. Bell. Are you sure? It looks very expensive, looking at the bottle doubtfully. Aiz. Yes, don't worry. Before Bell could continue arguing, Aiz took his hand and left the Twilight Mansion with Bell. Streets of Riveria. Bell and Aiz were walking through the streets of Riveria on their way to the Astraea family mansion. Aiz was ahead of Bell, he knew the place and knew where he was, so he had no problems, and he wasn't going to get lost. He didn't want Bell to reject his gift, so he took him by the hand as he walked ahead of him to take him to his family's mansion, and left him there. It was already late too, so in any case, he would have to go to his headquarters soon to sleep. Her plan worked because Bell was behind her, following her silently with the glass jar in his other hand. Aiz. Tomorrow I will wait for you early at the wall. When the sunlight passes from the walls of the Riveria, try to rest walking. Bell hi, following her. Astraea family headquarters. At the doors of the Astraea family headquarters, Aiz and Bell were arriving, who had gone without stopping until there. Seeing the mansion of the Bell Aiz family, he let go of her hand and knocked softly on the door to let them know they were there. Aiz. Don't save the seeds, they're yours, use them as you like, looking at him. Bell. Thanks Aiz. Aiz nodded expressionlessly, and just as she was about to turn around to leave, Bell spoke to her. Bell, see you tomorrow Aiz, smiling happily. Aiz turned around again, looking at Bell for a few seconds before answering. Aiz. Yes, see you tomorrow, Bell, smiling softly. Aiz turned around and left the place under the gaze of Bell, who watched her back walk away with total attention, ignoring the sound of the door opening, revealing allies who looked at Aiz with curiosity. Allies? Was that the doll princess? Surprised. Bell. Yes, entering. Allies. I see He, smiling mischievously, you're a danger Bell, your tenderness hides very well how dangerous you are, closing the door. Bell. What? Confused. Allies. Fufufu, smiling mischievously, you'll understand later, now get ready, you arrived later than you should have, sweating cold. Hello. Ryuu. Where were you? And so began a harsh sermon. End. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.